it's all right.
Yeah, I love that. It's beautiful.
It is. You sounded a little bit like you were about
No, I knew I was not. I just,
8:20. Oh, that is sad. You missed the rain too, right?
well,
Boas.
はい。 Hey, hey. Hey.
With
Yeah, and then we can remove mic like that.
No, not remove it because just turn it. So they can see. That was the part. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is İhsan Durdu. I will be chairing the IGF session today. Once again, as a host of IGF 2014, I would welcome you all to this beautiful historical city of Istanbul. I see some familiar faces here regardless. I hope you all have a memorable times and enjoyable stay here in Turkey. Thank you for your attendance. Special thanks again for Subi and Marilyn for organizing this session. Now we will resume the meeting. I open the session on the evolution of the internet governance ecosystem and the role of the IGF. This morning's main session will have two sub-sessions with several speakers. We will use the town hall approach in the format in engagement with participants in the room as well as remote participants joining us online. The first session will ask senior leaders from several organizations in the internet governance ecosystem, how internet governance ecosystem is evolving, what issues and external factors are, and the key activities are driving the progress, as well as coping with existing and future challenges. The focus will include several global processes, initiatives such as Net Mundial, CSTB Working Group on Enhanced Cooperation, UN CSTD, WSIS Plus 10 Review, ITU, ICANN, UNESCO, UNGA, Resolution on WSIS Review Modalities, and etc. All these will inspire the dialogue and engagement of the participants in the room and online. The second segment will open with statements from invited speakers on the implications of the first segment discussions towards the broader internet governance ecosystem, inclusiveness of all stakeholders, and for the IGF itself. Among all other questions, the session will ask what are the key issues, problems, and challenges that organizations within the internet governance ecosystem are facing today, how IGF and other related processes might be able to address them so that multi-stakeholder model that we all believe in can move forward, bring out the desired outcomes. Just my personal observation, high level and high number participation IGF 2014 Istanbul shows that IGF is live and moving forward. The support is there, and so much is expected from this inclusive process. Today, we have a number of well-respected experts and high-level officers with us here to share their thoughts, contributions, and their input. This session will be an interactive discussion session. I hope everybody here and participating remotely will have a chance to contribute to this very important thought-sharing session and discussions. Now, I would like to introduce the moderators, and Yovan from Diplo Foundation and Nermin from Egyptian government. We also have a remote moderator, Ms. Samantha, who will introduce comments and questions from our remote participants. Yovan and Nermin, now you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ihsan. Good morning, everybody, distinguished panelists, good friends, colleagues. We are really, really honored to be in Istanbul, and I think that we can say that the venue of the IGF reflects the current phase of the IGF. Istanbul is a place of rich historical heritage. We have been hearing that it is a bridge between, real bridge, not only between continents, but between new and old, between modernity and tradition. And that metaphor of the bridge has been inspiring a lot our discussion so far. And I'm sure that while you were walking by Bosphorus or lovely parts of the city, you got some sort of energy through social osmosis, and it inspires also us to try to create more bridges in the field of internet governance. Bridges that should cover some digital divides, old ones and emerging, and strengthen the space of internet governance. Well, this is one metaphor that is important to inspire our discussion, metaphor of the bridge. The other one is metaphor of the building, and I don't know if you can see the old building. Well, this was the building which was created in 2004 to explain the internet governance field with the 5 floors. And as you can see, it wasn't perfect building. It was building under construction, and it is still building under construction. And while we are discussing the future of the ecosystem, internet governance ecosystem, we may think about also this metaphor of the building. What should we build? Should it be bazaar-style building with inspired by lovely bazaars of Istanbul? Should it be the modern shopping center? Should it have one entry points, one door or many doors? How many elevators we need for this building? How fast the elevators will be? And there are many, many, many issues that we can develop around this metaphor of the building under construction. What we probably should aim in our discussion and in our efforts to improve internet governance field, we should aim at perfection. We should try to make ideal space, ideal building, but we should be modest and realistic about limitations and limitations to build the perfect building. And while we should be aiming at perfection, we shouldn't be disappointed if our future IG building won't be as perfect as we planned. This is some sort of metaphoric introduction to our discussion with the two metaphors of bridge and building under construction, inspired by this lovely city. And now I would like to invite my co-moderator, Nermin Al-Sadani, to give us more practical introduction to our session and the main topics that we'll address. Nermin.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Jovan, for the introduction and for the metaphor. Pleasure to be your co-moderator today, and I'm honored to be facilitating the discussion among key experts. Is it okay? The voice is okay. Okay. So I will share with you some housekeeping rules for our session today. Our session will last for 3 hours without break, but we will have a sort of 30-second break, and Jovan will introduce something that might be of interest to you. The session is meant to be as interactive as possible, so expect that we will refer back to you every now and then to pose some of the questions and seek some of your views and reflections on the discussions and interventions that will be flowing around the floor from our experts around here. And as our chair has rightly mentioned, we have a town hall discussion, and we will be discussing actually two very important issues. We will be discussing, as Jovan has mentioned, the internet governance new architecture, or the ecosystem evolving around the internet governance. And this is very important, and we've been listening to intense discussions maybe for the last year or so about how to evolve the internet governance at large and what possible solutions and scenarios that can pave the way for more fruitful discussions and a way forward. As well, we will be tackling a very important issue as well, that is the enhancing of in the Internet Governance Forum per se. The Internet Governance Forum this year reaches its 9th year, and next year there will be a decision by the UNGA in New York to renew this forum. And of course, as an active participants here in Istanbul IGF, we would like to see it renewed, and we would like to see it as well as strengthened and reformed as possible. So we will be dividing the discussion within the two segments between those two areas. And without further ado, maybe Jovan, you can start the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Nermin. Well, we'll start with the ecosystem or ecosystem, which sometimes we non-native speakers want to say with quite an interesting confusion in meaning. Therefore, eco or ecosystem question. Well, we are based, Diplo Foundation Geneva Internet Platform, in the building of World Meteorological Organization, where is a famous international panel on climate change. Those people are dealing with ecosystem, natural ecosystem. And in one of discussions with one of the leading scientists, he got interested in our use of the notion of IG ecosystem. I tried with my best efforts to explain to him, but he has been asking some scientific questions and trying to increase the precision in the meaning of the ecosystem. And I need the help when I return next week to Geneva to explain to him exactly what the IG ecosystem is. And we don't have a better person to help me in this exercise than Vint, please. Well, the challenge is to explain it in 2 minutes.
I'm going to try. First of all, let me say that the building model feels to me as if it is too rigid a metaphor, which is why ecosystem is more attractive. I hope we can do something about the squeaking. This is better? Okay, thank you. How about that? Maybe I could go to the other end of the room. All right, so first of all, the internet ecosystem, not just governance, the internet ecosystem consists of all the interested and affected parties, both natural and artificial, institutions and individuals. Second, it's a loosely coupled system, and that's very important. The relationship among the parties needs to be flexible. It's a multi-stakeholder ecosystem.
Go louder.
Is that not working?
Yeah. What about?
You want me to move
Could you
farther?
get closer, Vint, to the mic? Yeah.
You want me to get closer to the microphone and it screams. How's this? Is that better?
Much better. Thank you.
Oh, well, then we won't use that one anymore. I hope I'm not going to be docked my 2 minutes for that. This is an evolving system. New institutions and new artifacts in the internet environment are created at need. There are new and evolving practices for governance. So, for example, in the earliest days, the Advanced Research Projects Agency ran this whole program. Then the National Science Foundation, this is in the US, NASA and the Department of Energy, the Federal Networking Council, the Department of Commerce, NTIA, all this is an evolving system of governance. And then on the technical side, the Internet Architecture Board, the root servers, the IETF, IANA, the Regional Internet Registries, and the Number Resource Organization and ICANN. These are systems and entities in the governance system that get created at need. There are direct and documented interaction practices among these various parties in the ecosystem, and there are indirect and informal processes and practices. The IGF is one of those relatively informal processes, for example. There is an expanding interest in the internet. So from WSIS to WIGIG to the Internet Governance Forum, and now the expanding regional and national internet governance forums, which seem sprung up like mushrooms after a spring rain. But it's evidence of this expanding interest in the internet. In ICANN, there were several panels that were commissioned to speak to this. One of them was about the internet governance ecosystem in particular, and we said that that ecosystem exhibited a set of principles about which many, many different organizations and individuals have spoken. The Net Mundial codified many of those principles. The same ecosystem also had the possibility of documenting the relationships among the various parties, a web of relationships, a web of commitments among these interacting governance elements. And I thought if I could finish very quickly, speaking for Aaron and for the Numbers Resource Organizations and the other regional internet registries in terms of challenges that face us in this ecosystem. One of them is the runout of the IP version 4 address space and all of the policies that have to be invented in order to cope with that runout. And the second one is the long and almost interminable introduction of IPv6, which is going to be essential as the Internet of Things is upon us. So, Mr. Moderator, I will stop there and hope that it's been a helpful contribution.
Thank you, Vint, and very inspiring as usual. May I refer now to you, Ms. Nelly, in your capacity as the Vice President of the European Commission for Digital Agenda. The EU has always been very active on the different internet governance platforms. Yourself are a very active player as well, and we see you even on social media and so on and so forth. Could you please share with us your views on the key issues and challenges that the internet governance ecosystem now faces, and how can we enhance the way forward?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and I couldn't agree more. It is a fascinating audience. I didn't have a lot of time to enjoy the city, but I anyhow enjoyed all the inspiring people that are gathered here in Istanbul. Having said that, and asking your question, it is of main importance that we are speeding up, for the technology and the interest of a lot of people is tremendous. So we can't afford to go on and on in bilaterals and in congresses and gatherings like this and talking again about processes. Now we need to deliver in the implementation. And that's not an easy one, not at all. But I still think that the IGF is of main importance because it is a global recognizable institution, and that we can't blame when it's not functioning 100% as we are dreaming of. Then we have to take a couple of decisions, so to say. I care about the multi-stakeholder system. That, for me, is main. It's the right model, but if you care about it, then you want it to work. And that is where we have to communicate also to the outside world, that we are aware of that and that we will deliver. For you want it to be effective, for it's not just one of those hobby horses that is interesting and fascinating and nice to be involved with. You have to get it in a credible form. You need to stick to the openness and the transparency and the accountability and the inclusiveness. For me, the inclusiveness is also serving a other issue, for we are all worried about our economic development and that still so many people are not joining the economic development. This is an opportunity, an instrument where we can just get it. So on one hand, public authorities have a role to play, no doubt about that. It's not black and white. It is a multi-stakeholder formula, but we still have to involve governments, and therefore I'm a strong believer in the IGF. And we have to fulfill our roles, we have to uphold human rights, and I want to repeat that also in this country, and you can't keep me out of that. We need to be aware that human rights are extremely important and that it is connected with open internet. And of course, also I am aware that with systems of an open internet, it's not only all positiveness, but we have to act also in a decent way that it is getting human rights in the center and the rule of law, of course. On the other, we can't lose the private sector. We can't lose the private sector leadership that has given us so much about innovation, talking about openness. And therefore, and I am impressed, and yesterday during this session, the developing countries were proving that they are extremely active and that they are very creative. So now a majority of internet users are in developing countries. So be aware that there is so much talent at stake. And it needs more participants and it needs more representation. So also that, for me, is one of those lines talking about the IGF. We need to achieve all those things without fragmenting the global internet. It is a global scene, it is a global instrument, and that is the strength. Let's keep it like that, but also take into account that fragmentation would be the end of a successful story. So, not an easy one, no doubt about that. Many options, and that could be attractive, and that could also stimulate discussions, but we can't go on with discussions and not come to a real conclusion. I'm just finalizing. The IGF has successfully brought together different stakeholders and different stakeholders in that discussion fora. It is an open and a frank and an operational and an accessional discussion. No platform or whatever body you are thinking of can grow and develop properly if it has to renegotiate every time about the existence. So we should take our responsibility on that too. That anyhow the responsibility is at stake and that we take decisions that indeed the UN hopefully can act accordingly and create some stability to this forum. But the IGF needs to show it can act, and therefore I think a couple of issues are at stake. Multi-stakeholder, yes. Formula. Involvement of governments, yes. Having an opportunity to create the possibility for the IGF to act and not every time being uncertain, and then we can just push it in the right direction. Thanks.
Thank you for reminding us of the EU's constant and consistent position on the question of IGF as a key place for discussion on internet governance globally, and also bringing an interesting metaphor that we don't need, although we deal with digital world, we don't need black and white solutions or ones and zeros. We need more analog solutions reflecting the shades of modern society and complexity of modern society. Thank you once more. We are honored to have today with us Mr. Sharma, Secretary Deity of the Ministry of Communication and IT India. We know that India is one of the key players in the global internet governance, with very vibrant civil society, very dynamic ICT industry. Minister, we would like to hear from you, what do you see as the main challenges and opportunities for the reform of the or evolution of internet governance? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and excellencies, friends here this morning. Taking on from the last speaker, where you said it is not black and white, it's actually a gray. So there are many shades in between, and actually, you know, giving labels to these things creates a lot of problems. So I think we should recognize that internet is not some kind of one monolith which has got just one issue. There are many layers to this, and these layers will have to be dealt with differently. For different layers will require different kind of expertise, different kind of interventions. Internet governance deals with a large number of issues, systems, and processes, ranging from issues such as coordination of names, numbers, protocol parameters, to issues such as multilingualism and security, and of course the infrastructure. There is no doubt that effective internet governance mechanisms require the involvement of all stakeholders. Since the evolution of internet has itself been a product of many different, diverse groups working together in a loosely coordinated manner. Current institutions such as ICANN, ISOC, IETF, and the worldwide consortium, which form the backbone of the technical efforts associated with the internet, reflect that reality. Preserving existing systems which have worked well thus far and evolving new systems to address the emerging issues requires a dispassionate determination of which stakeholder groups are best equipped to deal with the particular issue and have the highest amount of expertise and responsibility when it comes to the issue. And this may be the governments, the technical community, the private sector, or the civil society, as the case may be, or a combination of each of these in any particular issue. No technical issue is devoid of policy implications, and likewise, no internet policy can be framed without a deep understanding of the technical issues of the underlying infrastructure. In India, MEG has been constituted for the organization of the first India Internet Governance Forum. The India IGF will serve as a platform for sharing knowledge, experiences, and expertise, including legal, economic, and technical inputs for developing a long-term vision for the future of the internet. We hope that the discussion at the India IGF will directly feed into both the global IGF as well as policy-making processes in India. We should consider strengthening the role of the Internet Governance Forum as envisioned in the Tunis agenda, and as India has emphasized in our submission to the working group on improvements to the IGF. The IGF may serve as a clearinghouse for public policy issues related to the internet. This would inform and help in development of the best practices on the relevant issues, which may be taken into further consideration of developing shared principles, norms, rules, nation-states, while formulating domestic laws and policies. India proposes to participate in existing global organizations and platforms in areas of security, standardization, as the Budapest Convention and W3C. It should aim to adopt best practices from these and contribute to strengthening such organizations with design aspects suited to its other developing countries. This would be an effective way of addressing present and future challenges and with respect to internet governance, and help preserve the open and seamless nature of the internet, its spirit of permissionless innovation, and its processes of organic development. The spirit of enhanced cooperation as envisaged by the Tunis agenda would be a useful tool to ensure that existing systems are adapted wherever required to meet the future challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Sharma, for developing further this metaphor introduced by Nelly Cruz on shades and the gray scale of internet governance. Our next speaker is Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and U.S. Coordinator for International Communication, Ambassador Daniel Sepulveda. Daniel, I would like to ask you to elaborate on this grayscale spectrum. What do you see as the main challenge and possible solution? What are probably the darker parts of the grayscale spectrum in both positive, negative and positive way, as a challenge, as a possible solution? Go ahead.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm thrilled to see how engaged everyone is and how large this particular crowd is. I look around this particular table and I see a lot of colleagues and a lot of friends, and I think that this is a joint in community effort at improving our internet governance processes and ecosystem. So during last year's IGF, there was a palpable sense of a community that was on the move, a diverse group of individuals and institutions with a desire to take this experiment, and the global internet governance system is an experiment in governance, to the next level. It was somewhat tense, but that tension was a reflection of our coming to terms as a community with the knowledge that it was time for some degree of change. And change has come, and most of it for the better. Our consensus at Net Mundial, to which we have to give an immense amount of credit to the host country of Brazil, as well as our friends within the internet community that helped organize that event, as well as the community's effort at ownership of the IANA transition, mark a pivotal and vital point in this movement. And this is a movement. Together, they make real the promise that global stakeholders can unite on equal footing in order to preserve and progress the promise of the internet. Now, at this IGF, I sense a release of creative determination, a determination to improve, preserve, and strengthen this forum for the good of the community, and a determination to build on the legacy that we have inherited. And for me, from our perspective, that legacy of an open system established by Mr. Cerf and Bob Kahn and Mr. Crocker and some of the others that are really legends in this community is incredibly important. We have to pay and treat it with humility and respect, and at the same time recognize that as the network broadens and reaches the billions of people in the world, that they not only will want to, but have a right to participate in its governance and future. So I think the rest of this conversation will be largely about how we can build on what's been achieved over the last year and continue to make this system dramatically more inclusive and democratic and participatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. And actually, if I try to summarize what we have been discussing, and I have to note that we have been listening to government perspective on the internet governance architecture and evolving ecosystem, I would say that we need to keep the internet open, transparent, inclusive, with more inclusion from the public role as well as the private role and civil society, and more importantly, to keep it not fragmented. And I would like to refer to you, Kathy, as a representative of a very active organization, ISOC, and ask you how do you see this and how do you see to maintain these maybe principles, if I may, and keep it not fragmented.
Thank you, and thank you also for having the Internet Society be here and so active in this forum. We consider this one of the most essential parts of the ecosystem that Vint just talked about. And while over time it has been about discussing ideas, it is quickly moving to wanting, as Nili keeps telling us, to implement. I want to say a couple of things about this idea of governance. First of all, the word worries me. It is too close to the word government. We're not here trying to set up some other house, although I understand the effort here. We're here to talk about how we govern ourselves on the internet. And so I want to just think about that as to what it is we're trying to first achieve, and then I have some thoughts about how we do it. I think it's always necessary to reflect back on the essential nature of the internet. Why do we care so much about this thing? Because it is one of the most innovative inventions. We call it a technology, but of course it's far beyond that humankind has ever endeavored. While there were original inventors, it has innovated from a bunch of small computers that were connected in a way never before seen, it has scaled to what we now see to a multinational, trans-global communication, collaboration, and connecting kind of technology. What are its principles? It has a global reach. Any end can reach any other end. And that is an amazing part of this nature all by itself. But it is also good for general purposes. The internet allows all kinds of things to happen on it. Thus, those gray areas about how we govern ourselves with any particular purpose we choose to use the internet for. Next, it supports innovation by anyone, anywhere, in a permissionless way. It does not require someone to go to an authority to ask that one can invent and to innovate upon it, which is why it has grown the way it has. And finally, it is accessible. Anyone can connect. Anyone can connect. Thus, when we talk about governing, I think there is a first principle that we must keep in mind and that I get concerned about when I hear sort of how we're building new structures. The first principle is don't break it. Don't break it. We have to make sure that this internet keeps evolving and growing and that the next, as I've said all week, unborn innovator gets the opportunity to use this great invention of mankind. Second thing, it is distributed. This is a distributed ecosystem because of the nature of the internet itself. The problems that arise are distributed. And thus the governance of those problems, of those issues, of these things we think we need to solve are indeed distributed. No one authority can decide all of that. Next, it must be everywhere. So anything we do must preserve the ability for it to grow to everyone. Any governance ideas or structures we have must ensure that we can extend the internet to where it is not. 2/3 of the world are yet to be connected. And finally, it's multi-stakeholder. What do we mean by that? Because of the very nature of the internet and how it is used, there are many interests. Because we have many uses, there are many interests. There are the interests, of course, of the technical community that keeps on innovating. But of course, there are the interests of the medical profession, of folks who use the internet for all kinds of other reasons, education, business, finance, many stakeholders involved. So how then do we govern ourselves? We govern ourselves in distributed kinds of systems that allow folks to actually contribute. So I'll stop there, but I think I wanted to make sure we laid a groundwork for the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, for providing us, reminding us of some core principles and values of the internet space, and nicely wrapping up the first part of our discussion. We are now moving to exploration and discussion on the concrete processes and experiences in attempts to facilitate this evolution of internet governance space. We have around the table people who spend hours, days, and if not months in discussing evolution of internet governance, and we'll try to harvest and harness their experience, direct experience in this field. While I'm introducing this, I would like to remind you that on the IGF website there is very useful summary of the different activities, processes, decisions made by the organization in the IG ecosystem. Therefore, please visit the website and consult this valuable resource. Our next speaker is Ambassador Benedicto Fonseca Filho from Brazil. Benedicto was involved in the preparation of Net Mundial, a very successful event in April this year. Benedicto, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jovan. I should start by saying, and in reference to the discussion we just had, that in our view,
my personal view, the challenge that lies ahead of us is very much the one we were facing 10 years ago in WISIS, how to make sure that in that constellation of actors, fora, processes that were mentioned initially by Windsurf, how to make sure that the various elements of this ecosystem we have can relate in a way that will evolve along the lines we have been promoting in a multi-stakeholder, inclusive, transparent way, take into account different roles, responsibilities of different stakeholders. So we are talking about different formats, different issues. One major element that, in my opinion, is badly needed to be tackled is how to make the different processes and fora interact more and profit more from each other. I think the multi-stakeholder way of doing things and processes, and IGF embodies this to the largest degree, should seek ways to engage more with the intergovernmental processes. I think that would be beneficial to those. And Net Mundial, in a way, was an attempt to, from the multi-stakeholder perspective, bring a contribution in the overall internet governance ecosystem by trying to identify principles and actions, interventions that are needed to improve internet governance. And then we were taking a very broad view, referring, of course, to the IGF, the role of IGF, that in all this constellation has certainly a very specific, very important role, that is to provide for the discussion of every issue. Nothing is off limits to be discussed at IGF, and I think as a result of the discussion we have at IGF, all those processes can benefit. Therefore, it was an honor for us. We are proud to have partnered with the international community, not as government, but as members of the Brazilian Steering Committee, which was on the Brazilian side the organizing party of Net Mundial, in order to bring that contribution. And again, I think the challenge is how to make sure this ecosystem as a whole will be improved and will be seen by all stakeholders as providing avenues for cooperation, for solutions in a way that will address everyone's concerns. And the solution, of course, is to try and explore mechanisms for this to happen. We have been exploring a few ideas in the context of conversations we have had, and we will be ready to explore. I think one thing that is badly needed is to bring the outcomes of IGF to fora that normally are composed primarily of people that do not normally come here. I think an effort is needed in New York, is needed to make sure that people that are there will see added value in aggregating to the discussions, the inputs that emanate from IGF discussion. As a diplomat, I've benefited very much from all this, and will be more than ready to convey that message. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and allow me to remind us all that we have a clock, 2 minutes per each speaker. I hope that you don't hate me for that. I'm eager to listen to all the interventions as we can, but let's stick for the beginning at least of the session to the 2 minutes clock so that we can listen to all of your rich interventions. Fadi, may I refer back to you now? And I have to say that you've been very active since your appointment as the president and CEO of ICANN. You inspired us all by the way you are able to present your point, and I would love to listen to your views on the challenges that we are facing and maybe the opportunities that these challenges provide us as well within the IG platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Nermeen, and good morning to all of you. I think I see two challenges ahead of us. The first is to take our knowledge and our expertise and our passion about this internet and how we govern it to other communities, so that we can engage the broader public in how we govern our internet. Industries are going to be very critical in this discussion. The internet now permeates all industries, all walks of life, all societies. And whilst we are 3,000 people here in Istanbul, there are billions of people out there and many organizations that are still not at the table. But they need us, and they need us to reach out to them. So the first challenge we have is to engage all of them. And the Internet of Things makes that challenge critical. If we do not appreciate that the Internet will imbue every aspect of society, industry, and politics, and we do not engage those responsible in all these areas, in this dialogue, we have a problem. The second challenge we have is to evolve Internet governance, just like the Internet itself, with permissionless innovation. Just like we want the Internet to be a place for permissionless innovation, we should allow permissionless Internet governance. We should allow everyone to participate in this debate. And I think it's two ways. We first should inform them, and then when they're here, we should engage them. These are our big challenges ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Fadi.
Thank you, Fadi, for outlining two main challenges. Our next speaker is Alan Marcus from the World Economic Forum. Alan, we would like to hear from you, how do you see the developments in the broader ecosystem, especially in the view of the new Net Mundial initiative? Thank you.
Thank you, Jovan. So first, I want to thank everyone here on this panel because I'm quite humbled by the stature that you all represent. I'm not equal in terms of expertise in this particular area, but I am an observer, and I certainly am observing quite a bit about the IGF, about Net Mundial, and other fora that are speaking on these issues. And what I'm hearing, and where I think we can be helpful and supportive as we learn, is the opportunity to contribute to the broader international effort, particularly focus on advancing a multi-stakeholder internet governance. And we heard that from Net Mundial, we hear that here. So we're looking at this as our opportunity to contribute in this fashion. In fact, we have two very specific contributions that we think could be helpful, and we need to learn from this process on the best way to accomplish them, and to an earlier speaker, a better way to bring these processes together. First is that recognition that these issues now are much broader than just the internet space. There are industries and sectors and communities that are not part of this discussion today that very much need to be a part. And how do we get them? We don't just go to them and say, let's talk about internet governance. They look at you like you're speaking some other language. So finding a way to communicate and leveraging our communities to do so. And then second, a platform that will galvanize support on very specific opportunities for delivery on some of these solutions that are already being defined here at the IGF and at places like Net Mundial. So with those two opportunities, I think we could make a very positive contribution in advancing this multi-stakeholder governance place.
Thanks, Alan. Actually, as we all know, parliamentarians have ever been active in the internet governance platforms, and we have seen many parliamentarians, especially from the EU, here in the IGF throughout the years. And I would love to listen to your perspective, Mr. Rafat, about the role of the parliamentarian and how can we maybe benefit from their own experiences in this particular point.
Well, I used to be a parliamentarian, a member of the European Parliament, but now I'm a Minister of Digitization and Administration of Poland. So I'm going to give you my governmental perspective right now. I mean, first of all, if you want to keep the internet as it is, unfragmented and open, my greatest plea to you is do not take a multi-stakeholder for granted, because there are quite a lot of governments who want to tell you what to do, and always think about the alternative. And I can tell you that there are quite a lot of worse governmental representatives than myself. Always think about it, because we talk about multi-stakeholder approach, but it can never be guaranteed. Most importantly, we have to think about quality of two-way communication, because it gives us engagement, that's for sure, but the question is whether it's going to guarantee quality of two-way communication. I mean, we have our own share of experiences in Poland when people were demonstrating on the streets against ACTA. We were consulting that for quite a long time, but we've learned from that moment on that it is all about the quality of consultation and interaction, that we have to be open and engage the people when we actually make certain decisions, and that's why we've decided to create the Digitization Council in Poland, a sort of Polish IGF, when we not only engage people, but we try to listen to them and we try to feed into the political process. And I think that this is really important, because one thing is to be open, one thing is to engage, another thing is to try to feed into the political process of actually making decisions. And this is the most important thing that we have to actually work on, to have that link with the policy process through recommendations, but also when we are actually making laws on international, European or national level, we have to have, excuse me for using Marxist terminology, a transmission belt from the discussions that we have within the multi-stakeholder approach into actually making those decisions. Because it's all good that we actually discuss things, but then sometimes that's the end of it. And I think that this is the greatest threat that can be posed to the whole process, because if it stops there, who is going to intervene? The governments will intervene. And gatherings as these will be very interesting and engaging, but there will be nothing come out of it. Nothing coming out of it. So that's why the link to the policy process is the thing that now we have to focus on and start working on. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister, for an enriching discussion, bringing quite a few extremely valid points about implementation, the effectiveness of multi-stakeholder processes with the rich experience from Poland, recent history. Thank you once more. Well, I will introduce our next speaker in a slightly innovative way. I will ask you the following question. How many of you have read or are aware of the blog of Professor Milton Miller? Could you raise your hands? Okay, great. Milton, you have a great following in the room, and a well-deserved following in the room. Milton Miller is a professor at the University of Syracuse and one of the leading experts in internet governance. Please give us 2 minutes. I know it will be difficult. Reflections on the discussion.
I'm a 2-minute man. So here's my 2 cents in 2 minutes. I see 3 key challenges: globalization, the IANA transition, and cybersecurity, which includes surveillance. Now, with respect to globalization, there's a lot of talk about fragmentation, but it's not really technical fragmentation. It's the way the internet fosters a globally integrated space for communication and a globally integrated market for information services. This globalization triggers serious geopolitics as specific nation states seek to protect themselves from it, both for political and economic reasons. One of the big problems is a tendency of certain states and ideological groups to equate a globally integrated information. We need to denationalize ICANN and create new oversight and accountability mechanisms that are not reliant on a single government or intergovernmental agency. And finally, for cybersecurity, I'm talking both in the civilian and military sense, we have to cope with the dangers of militarizing cyberspace and the growing tendency, even among liberal states, to create more nationalistic and protectionist policies in the name of cybersecurity. Thank you.
Thank you, Milton, and thank you for keeping the time. In fact, I will take... So I will take from the brief comments from Milton and the new terminologies that I'm listening to, denationalizing ICANN, the IANA, and the other terminologies that you've brought. And I think our discussion will not be complete if we did not bring in what is happening in New York at the consultation of both the WSIS Plus 10 and the enhanced cooperation. And we have Murphy with us from the CSTD UNCTAD. And I would love to call upon you, Murphy, to give us some of maybe the highlights of what's taking place in New York.
Thank you very much, Nermeen, and thank you for calling me to this panel. Actually, I would prefer to talk about the work of the Commission on Science and Technology for Development as such, since we haven't been party of the negotiations that took place in New York on the modalities of the overall review of the General Assembly. But talking about the work of the CSTD, as you know, the CSTD is really the only body that follows up the WSIS commitments in their entirety, as it does assist the ECOSOC in this very important task. And at the moment, the CSTD implements a request from the ECOSOC to conduct a 10-year review of the implementation of WSIS outcomes, and we have taken this work very seriously. We are collecting all stakeholders' views and experiences on the implementation of WSIS outcomes, and we do this through an open invitation for inputs. Please look at our website. We welcome all kinds of contributions to the review, and the deadline for sending them is 15th of September. Also, we organize face-to-face meetings since we try to reach all stakeholders in all corners of the world. We organized 2 in the course of this IGF, and more are in the pipeline. So the Commission will discuss this 10-year review in the next intersessional panel, which takes place in Geneva at the end of November. And takes it forward from there. The Commission also holds a substantive discussion on the 10-year review in the next annual session in 2015, and then the outcome of its review will feed into the overall review of the General Assembly, which you, Nermeen, just referred to. So these are the Commission's activities at the moment in regards with the 10-year landmark of the WSIS implementation. I would like to touch upon the multi-stakeholder cooperation as well, since we have various experiences of that in the Commission. The CSTD, I would say, has hugely benefited from the interaction with experts from various fields. And multi-stakeholder cooperation isn't just about having different stakeholders sit in the same room. We have realized that. It is about doing something that would not be done otherwise.
Mary, could you wrap up the...
Okay. I would just say that the multi-stakeholder cooperation in the CSTD has really raised awareness, knowledge, and understanding across different stakeholders. And I would thank everybody who has supported us and been part of our work.
For inviting ITU. For us, internet governance is a global dialogue, and each forum, be it IGF, be it ITU's WTPF, CSTD's UNCTAD CSTD, multi-organization efforts like the WSIS Plus 10 that I'm going to talk about, NetMundial, others, they essentially contribute to moving the discussion a little bit and to improve our understanding a little bit more. So it's essentially a global dialogue. And I'd like to highlight the WSIS Plus 10 high-level event that Johan just mentioned, which we had in Geneva in June this year. It was hosted by ITU, but co-organized by ITU, UNESCO, UNCTAD, UNDP, with the engagement of many, many different UN agencies. I'm speaking fast because I'm looking at the clock also, sorry. But this was preceded by a year-long multi-stakeholder process with 5 physical meetings open to everyone to participate, anyone to contribute, everything posted online. The outcome documents were developed in a fully open, multi-stakeholder, bottom-up process, and it was adopted by consensus in Geneva in June. And many of you here in the room were there and participated in the process. And we had 1,600 stakeholders from 140 countries, 100 ministers, deputies, so a lot of people, a lot of high-level delegations, and a lot of stakeholders. And we believe it sets a good stage for the further discussions on the overall review process, including at CSTD, including at the General Assembly. This is good material adopted by consensus. And last year, we did something similar at the WTPF, following a very similar process, open to all stakeholders, and an outcome which was enriched by the perspectives brought in by each of the stakeholders. And we are really thankful to everyone who participated, really thankful. And we'll continue to work hard to, of course, improve ourselves in providing a platform for you. And we look forward to counting on your trust and support. Just a couple of lines. The challenges are clear here. I mean, the challenge is always to get consensus among a diverse set of stakeholders, each with their own perspective, all depending on their roles and responsibilities. But that is the beauty of the whole process, consensus among a diverse set of stakeholders. And we really look forward to having you at ITU in future events. Thank you.
Thank you, Preetam, for bringing experience from the latest examples of the multi-stakeholder processes at the ITU. Our next speaker is from Turkey, Mr. Salim Ketevanlioglu. I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrongly. He will bring us the host country perspective. What is your intake from this IGF, and what are your views on the future evolution of internet governance ecosystem? Please.
Teşekkürler Sayın Başkan. Sayın Bakanlar, Sayın Büyükelçiler, saygıdeğer konuşmacılar ve katılımcılar, hepiniz ülkemize hoş geldiniz. IGF'in geleceğinden önce aslında IGF'in geçmişine kısaca bir bakmak istiyorum. 2005 yılında VİGİK için görüş sorulmuştu. Türkiye'nin görüşü çok kısaca, çok taraflı, meşru, şeffaf, hesap verebilir ve katılımcı bir yapının olmasını öngörmüştü. Daha sonra Tunus zirvesi öncesinde Cenevre'de yapılan toplantılarda PrEPCOM 3'te özellikle Türkiye internetin istikrarını, güvenliğini, devamlılığının önemine vurgu yaptı ve olası bir değişikliğin de devrimsel değil evrimsel yapılması gerektiğini belirtti. Bu IGF'in tematik bu toplantının, bu oturumun temasının da evolution olması da ayrı bir şekilde benim dikkatimi çekmişti. Türkiye yine 2013'te 68. Birleşmiş Milletler Genel Kurulu'nda diğer AB üye ve aday ülkeleriyle birlikte IGF'in devamından yana bir tavır sergilemişti. Ve 2015'ten sonra da IGF'in devam etmesini, yine tüm paydaşlarla çok paydaşlı bir şekilde devam etmesine vurgu yapmıştı. Sürekli vurguluyoruz çok taraflı katılımın olmasını. Zannediyorum 1970'lerde Sayın Windsurf de burada internetin ilk geliştirildiği zamanlarda Internet Governance Forum düzenlenmiş olsaydı bu kadar çok farklı yerden bu kadar çok katılımcı da olmazdı. Bugün 3000 kişiyi İstanbul'da topladık. Bu da internetin etki gücünün ne kadar yüksek olduğunu hepimize gösteriyor. Katılımın bu kadar çok olması, etki gücünün bu kadar çok olması karar mekanizmalarının da aynı derece açık olduğunu göstermiyor maalesef. Önümüzdeki süreçte bu kadar çeşitli tarafın karar mekanizmalarına da etki etmesini temenni ediyorum. Özellikle CCTLD gibi doğrudan ulusları ilgilendiren, ülkeleri ilgilendiren konularda birkaç teknik kişinin eline bırakılmaması gerekiyor. Böyle ciddi milletlerin kaderiyle ilgili konular. Bu konular biraz daha uluslararası platformda diplomatların ve politika yapıcıların vereceği ortak kararlarla alınması gerektiğini düşünüyorum. IGF'in devamını diliyoruz ve IGF'in devamında yine çok katılımcılığın önemine vurgu yapıyoruz ama aynı zamanda karar alma mekanizmalarında da bu çok taraflılığın etkili olmasını diliyoruz. Teşekkürler Sayın Başkan.
Thank you so much. And back to another very important process that has been taking place for maybe the previous year, and I will refer back to you, Peter Major, to give us some highlights on the Enhanced Cooperation Working Group and the conclusion of the group work, please.
Thank you, Nermin. I just want to reflect on the remarks of Neelie Kroes about IG internet governance being neither black nor white. If I look around, I am one of the representatives of the whiter shade of gray. And I am not alone if I look around the public as well. So getting back to the internet governance and in particular to the CSTD working group on enhanced cooperation, it was a challenge. It was a multi-stakeholder group based on the experience of the first multi-stakeholder group of the CSTD, which was on the improvements of the IGF. And I am pleased to tell you that most of the recommendations of the previous working group have been already implemented or being implemented, and it was a very successful one. Now, in the IG internet governance meetings, probably we have ups and downs. I should remind you about the WICIT, the World Conference International Telecommunications. I should remind you of the WTPF. So I think enhanced cooperation, the working group, in itself, the process was very successful. We had very, very interesting discussions about the roles of governments. And one of the results I should emphasize is the mapping exercise to identify existing mechanisms where enhanced cooperation subjects are being treated and to identify the gaps. Now, the work of the working group has been paused at this time, but the work is being carried out by the Secretariat of the CSTD, and probably the results of this mapping exercise are being carried over during the intersessional meeting, which Mary mentioned earlier, and hopefully we shall continue in this direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter, and may I welcome on behalf of all of you, Dr. Typhoon from our host country, and I would like to ask you, Dr. Typhoon, what are, in your views, the key challenges and opportunities that you see in the ICT and the value of the IGF? And I would request that we put our speakers, because it will be in Turkish.
Teşekkür ediyorum Sayın Chairman. Tüm katılımcılara günaydın diyorum, hoş geldiniz diyorum. Gerçekten çok ilginç bir faydalı forum oluyor. ICT'deki sorunların başında bana, yani birçok sorun var da ben özellikle altyapı ihtiyacına dikkat çekmek istiyorum. Çünkü data her geçen gün çok daha fazla büyüyor, gelişiyor. Son 13 yılda, yani 2000-2013 arasında kullanılan data tam 190 kat artmış. Çok hızlı bir şekilde bizim sabit ve mobil altyapıyı geliştirmemiz gerekiyor. Yoksa tıkanıklıklarla karşılaşılması kaçınılmaz diye düşünüyorum. Burada da bir takım problemler var. Yani altyapıyı geliştirelim, tamam da nasıl geliştireceğiz? Burada bir takım handikaplar var. Biz örneğin Türkiye'de sabit ve mobil altyapıya, özellikle fiber altyapıya yatırım yapacak işletmeleri 5 yıl regülasyondan muaf tuttuk korumak için. O yüzden de son 2-3 yıldır gerçekten fiber altyapısı çok hızlı bir şekilde gelişmeye başladı. Yine Evrensel Hizmet Fonu'nu kullanıyoruz ama bu konunun ayrı bir şekilde değerlendirilmesi lazım. Yoksa internetin çok gelişen imkanlarından sabit ve özellikle mobilde yararlanmak giderek zorlaşacak diye düşünüyorum. Bir dikkat çekmek istediğim husus da yine bu konuda, yine altyapıya bağlı olarak mobil sistemler, haberleşme sürekli mobil sistemlere kayıyor. Şu an Türkiye'de %91'den fazla haberleşme mobil sistemler üstünden. Yeni nesil teknolojiler geliyor. İşte 3G geldi, 4G geldi. Çok kısa bir süre sonra ciddi bir frekans ihtiyacı ortaya çıkacak. Bu konuda en önemli kaynağın da ben yayıncılıkta kullanılan frekanslar olduğunu düşünüyorum. Özellikle karasal yayıncılık giderek azalıyor. Onun yerine yeni nesil yayıncılık, işte uydu, kablo, internet üzerinden gelen hizmetler geliyor. Oradaki çok kıymetli olan o bandın, yani 470-862 MHz arasındaki bandın, ki kapsaması bildiğiniz gibi çok kuvvetli, bunun çok iyi değerlendirilmesinin gerektiğini düşünüyorum. ICT'deki sorunlarla ilgili birçok şey konuşulabilir ama ben hemen fırsatlara geçmek istiyorum. Bu konudaki en önemli fırsatlar da tabii ki sayısal uçurumun azaltılması. Bu bir ülkedeki yaşayan insanların en doğal hakkıdır, sayısal uçurumun azaltılması. Aynı zamanda bu tabii çok önemli bir başka sonuçlar da meydana getiriyor. En azından o kişiler için daha adil bir gelir dağılımı, daha önemli fırsatlara yol açabiliyor. Bunun dışında tabii bütün ülkelerin en önemli sorunlarından bir tanesi büyük şehirlere göçü de çok önemli bir ölçüde engelliyor diye düşünüyorum. ICT'yi değerlendirmeyi de son olarak birkaç cümleyle yapmak istiyorum. Şimdi gerçekten bir iki rakam vermek istiyorum. Şu an itibariyle, biraz evvel gelirken aldığım istatistiklere göre şu an itibariyle bu forma, İstanbul'daki yapılan IGF formuna 3400 civarında kişi fiilen katılmış durumda. 3400 ve 155 ülke. Muhtemelen bu rakam yarın 3500 olacak, ülke sayısı da 160'a çıkabilir. Şimdi bu hani bu kadar büyük bir katılım, tamam İstanbul'umuz güzel bir şehir ama onun dışında IGF bir ihtiyaç. Yani 155 ülke 3400 katılımcı bir ihtiyacı gösteriyor. O nedenle burada pek çok konu konuşuluyor. Gerçekten de çok ilginç konular konuşuluyor. Burada yapılması gereken şey bana göre daha somut, daha planlı çalışma için bizim bir internet evrensel beyannamesi konusunda bir hemfikir olmamız lazım ve bunun alt katmanlarını çalışmamız lazım. Örneğin kişisel verilerin korunması, siber güvenlik, kişilik hakları, özel hayatın gizliliği, çocuk pornosu gibi alt segmentleri belirleyip onun üzerinde çalışırsak daha kısa sürede daha somut sorunlar, çözümler buluruz diye düşünüyorum. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you for your intervention, for hosting us in this great event in Istanbul. Our next speaker is Andrew Wiskov from the OECD Directorate for Science and Technology in the Industry. I would like also to invite our remote participants. They shouldn't be remote. They should engage more, and we would like to hear also their views later on after Andrew. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this group. As you know, OECD takes an economic perspective via our evidence-based analysis. Here it's very clear that the digital economy is the most dynamic force in the economy, creating numerous opportunities and challenges, but I would say it's quite a disruptive force, and it's coming at a time with a lot of fragility in the economy, so it's not being universally embraced by all parts. We bring a historical perspective as well. By the nature of the history of the internet and our member countries, we've been at the forefront of many of these internet governance issues for a very long time, at least dating back to a ministerial meeting we held in Ottawa in 1998, which for us ushered in a multi-stakeholder approach. That ministerial recognized early on the huge economic potential that the internet could bring. We've also been working on for decades issues like privacy, broadband diffusion, and most recently public sector information as an input to the new digital economy. These policies are useful, we think, globally, and we've improved our outreach effort. As I said, we've been an early adherent of the multi-stakeholder process, not only in our policy recommendations, such as those delivered in 2011, but also in practice. We formally invited civil society and the technical community to our table in 2009. The biggest challenge I see going forward is moving beyond the relatively small community here to the whole economy, which is now dealing with the digital economy. I see it very clearly at the OECD, where we are unique in having a multidisciplinary perspective that covers nearly every policy issue. I have joint projects with my colleagues in the health area and big data and dementia. I have joint projects with my colleagues in tax on the G20 mandate we have on base erosion and profit shifting, which is focusing one element on the digital economy. And now I'm moving to work with my colleagues in the Employment Directorate on what it means for skills and employment in the future. We will have a ministerial on this topic in 2016 in Mexico that takes this broader view, and we look forward to helping the IGF as it deals with this challenge, and we are happy to support it in that endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for bringing evidence-based policy making in the IG discussion, which is highly important. Now, we close the first phase with a very valuable intervention from our speakers. Now, I would like to invite audience, both here in the room and the remote participants, to reflect and to use this unique opportunity to pose the questions to our panelists, and then panelists will answer. You should queue in front of these two microphones. We'll take 4 questions. I think, realistically speaking, we have 10 minutes, and obviously short questions to the point, preferably reacting to some points that were raised during the discussion. Please, you have a real challenge to ask the first short question. Please, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for allowing me to make some comments. My comments is 2 parts. First part relating to the internet governance. The most important issue in internet governance is multi-stakeholderism. In that process, all stakeholders inclusively should participate. Nevertheless, they should have equal footing. That equal footing does not exist.
Could you pose the question, specific question? This will be important.
That is a question that has not been answered.
Okay, the question is how to achieve
how
equal footing.
the equal footing of the multi-stakeholder constituencies, governments, civil society, private sector, technical community and academia to be ensured.
Thank you. And second question is?
Yeah. The second question is that we need to talk about the inclusiveness. The inclusiveness means to reach the developing countries, and I see that how it should be ensured that developing countries have that one. Now, about the IGF itself.
Therefore, we have 2 questions, very limited time. First, how to achieve equal footing, and second, related to some extent, how to increase inclusiveness. Thank you very much.
I have a question about the IGF itself.
IGF we will discuss after the break, please.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
The IGF.
We'll discuss IGF evolution after the break. Thank you. Our second speaker, please.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Per Strömbäck. I'm the editor of Netopia.eu. We're a Brussels-based web magazine and think tank on the digital society. And my question to the panel this morning is, what is the plan B? Every panelist has sung the praise of the multi-stakeholder model on the assumption that it's the only possible model for a global internet. At the same time, I get the impression that there is pressure toward the multi-stakeholder model, and there are a lot of topics being discussed in various workshops at this conference, which are far removed from the technological topics for which the multi-stakeholder model was originally designed. So what if this pressure becomes too strong? What if the multi-stakeholder model crumbles under this pressure? What are some of the options for other global internet governance models?
The question is, what is the plan B?
What is the plan B?
Thank you very much. Dear panelists, we have three questions. How to achieve equal footing, how to increase inclusiveness and ecosystem, and how to ensure that we have a plan B, or how to consider different options. I think, Rafael, you already mentioned the question that we shouldn't take a multi-stakeholder approach for granted. Could you reflect on this third question, please, in particular?
No, actually, I wanted to take a crack at the first one, because what I want you to tell you, I'm a government minister, and I know that many NGOs are not happy with what happened, for example, at the Net Mundial. You always look for the perfect solution, but always remember that the best is the enemy of the good. I mean, I've never seen anything that open in my life when it comes to discussions, engagement, and so on and so forth. It doesn't mean that it cannot be improved, but it is one of the most open formats that I've ever seen. The problem is the one that I've mentioned. The problem is, how do you then feed it on into the political process, so then the equal footing is still there. So it's not that, we speak freely, we have the equal footing in meetings like these, because I think that this is guaranteed. I mean, this meeting proves that. But then the question is that this is not forgotten, and that it's not taken over by the big guys, and then the whole equal footing is just a theatrum of the process, and it doesn't really feed in into making the actual decisions.
Thank you, Rafael. I guess we should unpack the general notion and look into the specificities, how to ensure the robustness of multi-stakeholder process, and this unique bridge between discussion and policy-making processes. Thank you for your reflection. Now, we will just check if we have any comment from our remote participants before we wrap up the session and move to the second part of IG almost marathon. Well, that's the... we don't have any comment. Nermin?
So regarding Plan B, can someone from the panelists, maybe Kathy, you can refer to Plan B if you can?
In listening over the last couple of days, I think that's the essential question that's being asked. How do you take what are best practices, what are ideas that are actually already being implemented? By the way, much is happening. Much is happening out in the world, and if you start to actually map what is happening, I think we would have a better discussion than some notion that nothing is happening. I think our best Plan B are national IGFs. I am very delighted that there is a grass movement for the national IGFs, the people who are in their regions, to actually discuss the issues that are closest to them and closest to their government. We saw one example in Brazil how this can happen. There is a natural sort of community that comes together who are on equal footing in the beginning of the conversation. They structure it that way. There's a decision as to whether what has to be decided really needs to go to a legislative solution or to a community solution or to an individual or a corporate solution. All solutions are not the same. Once that happens, then there is an ongoing consultation. I'm looking at Brazil only as an example. Consultation process, and when and if government action is required, it then has an implementation process that also includes the stakeholder body. That is one example that is worth looking at for thinking about how we actually execute on this terrific and absolutely necessary idea.
Thank you, Kathy. We have a question from remote participants. Subi, please.
Yeah, it's Subi Chaturvedi, a remote moderator. There's a question from the main room, privately sent, for Andrew. Andrew, they're asking, how is it that you plan to integrate insights from multi-stakeholder governance processes, public voices, and individual opinions with the study of digital economy that you just shared with us? Thank you.
It may not be well known, but we have an official committee at the OECD, the Digital Economy Policy Committee, at which stakeholders sit and they read our documents, provide comments, which are then considered in the redrafting and finalization of these documents. That's how they're involved. We've done it with business and organized labor for a long time. It's only since 2009 we've invited formally the civil society through a federation called CSAC to participate in this process as well.
Thank you, Andrew. We can wrap up discussion, and I will try to just highlight a few points from which rhyme through our discussion. The first one is that there is a real challenge how to preserve innovative, dynamic, and development-oriented internet space, and in that space, internet governance, while in the same time addressing challenges of our time related to cybersecurity, cybercrime, and other challenges which are emerging. We heard that much is happening. Also, the underlying message is that we have to broaden IG footprint. IG footprint both in terms of inclusion, but also in knowledge and extending knowledge about IG to the communities worldwide. Then we also heard from that the IG is not black and white. It is the really process with many shades of gray and many different dynamics. A lot of it is happening in the IG. IG should be evolution, not revolution. This is one of the tweets which came from our discussion. And multi-stakeholder process shouldn't be taken for granted. We have really to see what are the elements to, in a way, dissect the process and see how to strengthen it and to make it more robust. Now, those are few points from discussion. I'm sure that we will find the other relevant inputs and insights in the discussion after the short break. This was Zoom out session. Now we'll zoom in on the IGF in the internet governance ecosystem. We were thinking how to make a short pause or short break. There were various ideas, including to start IG Pilates. But then, since I'm not a great expert in IG Pilates, I didn't endorse this idea. But I would like to invite you to stretch a bit, to take a pause for exactly 10 seconds. 30 seconds, okay, so you're more generous. And we'll continue with discussion on IGF in IG ecosystem. Thank you for all comments and inputs.
So this is, dear all, this is only 30 seconds stretching. We're not leaving the room. We'll continue that right away with the second segment.
May I please request everyone to take your seats? We're about to begin now.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we get to functions what we're doing. So this is just some of the things on Sunday, and go through staff arrival, just a little bit about arrivals, what we're doing. Welcome reception dinners.
Okay, folks, your 30 seconds is over. Please take a seat. We're going to get started on the second session.
Rooms,
The privilege of being the co-organizer is I get to lock the doors. Please take a seat. We're going to start in 2 minutes.
Zambia.
سبتمبر بس مش عارفه امتى بالظبط. Start. Speakers, please be seated. We will continue right away, please.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I think we should start the second part of the session. Please be seated. And I would like to add some personal experience with all these inclusiveness and getting involved all different parts of the society, including government bodies and political policy decision makers. I think we need a lot more dialogue, consultation, and education. In many cases, many parts of the society and even some decision makers unaware of the multi-stakeholder model, how it works and processes, and what are the benefits that can bring into society. So this is a very important part of the whole action plan that we should consider. Thank you, Darmin. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for your patience and for keeping the room quiet so that we can, if possible, so that we can continue our discussion. We have been joined now with Mr. Getichu Ngida from UNESCO, and UNESCO has recently been very active on the internet platform, and they have conducted a study on internet. And I would like to welcome Mr. Ngida to share with us what are the results of this study and what are the efforts of the UNESCO on the internet or internet governance platform in general.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think UNESCO considers the IGF to be one of the WSIS most important outcomes, and we continue to strongly support it. We've made this point very clear in our submissions to the MAG chair's call for information on the impact of IGF and the chair of the CSTD concerning WSIS. UNESCO member states also confirmed in November 2013 the final statement of the outcome of the WSIS review, which acknowledged the importance of IGF and renewed its commitment to the Internet Governance Forum. On the
Following the Snowden affair, the UNESCO members had a heated debate on how the internet actually impacts on UNESCO's specific mandate. Some members wanted to have a normative instrument, others wanted standards and guidelines, and others didn't just want to touch it. After long and hard debate, they came to a consensus where they've asked the Secretariat to undertake a comprehensive study on internet-related issues and what future actions UNESCO should take. And this study should be as comprehensive and consultative as possible. And we've been doing that over the last few months, which will culminate into a first draft report. It was an international conference in March 2015, for which I take this opportunity to invite every one of you. The UNESCO is approaching this study with what it calls internet universality, giving it 4 anchor principles or frameworks, if you like. The first one is human rights based, and the second is openness, and the third access broadly defined, as we've discussed over the last few days, and the fourth anchor is multi-stakeholder approaches. Within this framework, we will be dealing with on issues related to freedom of expression and the free flow of information, rights, privacy, and all those related issues. And I have been with some groups this morning actually taking input and feedback from our stakeholders on these issues. So this is where we are. UNESCO is committed to these principles. And once again, I invite you all to join us, first to respond to the questionnaires which you find on our website, and secondly to join us in the conference the 3rd and the 4th of March 2015 in Paris. And that will lead to the General Conference of UNESCO in 2015, feeding into, hopefully positively, the WSIS Plus 10 review event at the UN General Assembly in December 2015. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alejandro Pisanti from University of Mexico. Alejandro, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jovan. Thanks you, Subi, Marilyn, and whoever else was instrumental in inviting me to this panel. I'll make some comments, try to be very brief in them. Net Mundial has been mentioned, and it's part of the evolution of the or at least marks a coordinate. It was a one-off process to identify existing consensus, took several years to get there, 6 months to draft. This is one of the examples of things that happen at the sides of the IGF that can be useful in its progress, but the main discussions have to remain in IGF. The way IGF continues to work is best illustrated by the discussion on network neutrality that we have had over the last few days, where you can tease out the issues, separate by countries or regions, ask questions that need research to answer them. Participants will do this research in the countries and regions and come back next year for a new cycle. Decisions will be made in some countries, but not by the IGF. Mechanisms have to emerge and evolve organically. The IGF is a great place for discussions among the actors in these mechanisms. The evolution also is not only in creating new things, but also closing down some things that are obsoleted or superseded. The IGF, in its evolution, in its openness, in its very broad format, still is not able to impact directly on very sensitive issues to society and to civil society in particular, like surveillance, censorship, blocking and filtering their technical characteristics, but has to continue to be a catalyst to highlight the damage these things do, especially when they use the infrastructure of the internet in ways mandated by the upper layers. Free speech has to be accompanied in what you allow in the governance of the internet, has to be accompanied by freedom to associate. Sharing ideas does not change the world, organizing does. I keep high hopes for the civil dialogue opportunities of the internet that are exemplified and reshaped by the IGF, and also the IGF is a great place where we can discuss what is the governance of the technical operation of the internet and where the governance of people's conduct and speech, organizing, etc., remains in the realm of law and social practice and does not take over the routers and switches. We see several cases, to finalize, where governments or intergovernmental organizations and other top-downers, I will say, will tell you basically, when I want your multi-stakeholderism, I will give it to you. Multi-stakeholderism is built by the stakeholders. The only thing on the internet that works top-down in a centralized space is the game Tetris. And even there, the way you get points is when the overarching structure you build vanishes into thin air.
Thank you. Alejandro, we are discussing how to extend the footprint of the IGF and have higher inclusion and more participants, especially from developing countries. Our next speaker is Mark Harwell from the UK government. Mark, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jovan, and good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to have been invited to participate in this session. The IGF is at a turning point, there's no doubt about that. It's geared up. We had the CSTD working group on improvements of the IGF, which Peter Major referred to earlier, making recommendations on how to improve the IGF. And we've had calls for strengthening the IGF and so on. So I just want to start, first of all, to consider where is the IGF in the internet governance ecosystem and its role and functionality, given that it's evolved successfully, it's been improved and enhanced, and there's innovations coming into play and so on. I see this as a critical forum. As we heard this morning, the internet governance ecosystem is very complex. There's a lot of initiatives happening. Just in practical terms, it's not possible to get to every meeting. We, the UK government, we weren't able to get to the launch of the World Economic Forum Net Mondial initiative. We just couldn't do it. So you need some forum to enable us all to understand how all these initiatives are intersecting, which ones are more important, where the priorities are, where progress is being made, and how the whole evolution of internet governance is actually happening. So the IGF really does fit the bill as a kind of central focus, a location for exchanges and information sharing about that. UK government has supported the IGF from its very start. In fact, we were in at the genesis of it in the final negotiations in Tunis. We were one of the ones who led to the development of the concept of the IGF, where everybody's around the table on an equal footing. That's key. So we've supported the IGF as a financial donor throughout, and we've advocated renewal of the mandate. We would like to see the mandate renewed for a 10-year period, and we've contributed through participation in the MAG in energizing efforts to contribute to its successful evolution.
Thank you.
So that's my opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We just have heard the broader view how the IGF should evolve and fit into this new and fast-changing IG ecosystem or landscape. I would like now to open the floor for a few questions and comments from the audience, and would like to invite Mr. Arasti to make the comments that he planned to do before the break. Now the comments, we are opening discussion on IGF. Mr. Arasti, please join us and reflect on the future of IGF.
Thank you very much. In a democratic society, people should be left to express their views in the way that they wish. I had two comments with respect to the previous session, but I was asked or forced to modify my comments into the question, but I did it. But now I have a comment on the IGF, not questions. IGF is established based on the UN process. So decision on extension of activities for IGF, it depends on the decision of the United Nations. That is number one. Number two, we have discussed 9 years. Good. Discuss, exchange of view. Now is the time to come from the words and exchange of views to the action. What are the next steps? What is the result of all of these exchange of views and discussions? Where we go? We have to go to the implementation. If we want that IGF continue, first of all, the mandate need to be modified. We should have a mandate which result in some sort of implementation, and this implementation should be properly explained. We could not continue to have sessions and sessions and discuss in parallel various issues without having any outcome in a sort of implementation. So words to be translated into action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Arasti, for a highly important and relevant point that has been also mentioned in the first part of our discussion. We need a concrete solution for some problems, especially for quite concrete problems and challenges, and I think that in the rest of our discussion we will focus on the way how we can have outcome of the IGF process and how this outcome can affect the internet society and the digital sphere globally. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Jānis Kakliņš, ambassador from Latvia and chairman of Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group. I was not intended to speak, but the previous speaker raised a question and I just wanted to answer that. IGF has been created as a discussion forum where decisions would be nurtured but taken elsewhere. That is why MAG made a call, and about 15 organizations responded to the call and provided information what decisions and actions have been taken as a result of engagement in the MAG, in IGF. So please consult that document and you will get an answer to your question. To distinguished panelists, I would like to maybe ask your opinion in very concrete terms. IGF should evolve. How you see that practical evolution, how far we should go in addressing issues in very concrete terms. For instance, this year, you know, we introduced the best practice stream, and that will produce the document on 5 or practical proposals on 5 different topics. Do we need to go into negotiations, or do we need to continue in compiling information about what has worked where, and put that for use of everybody? I would be very curious to hear your opinion throughout the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Karklins, and thank you, Mr. Arasti, as well for your comments. Actually, the rest of our discussion will evolve around these comments and remarks from our audience, and as well from the deliberations that have been delivered during the first segment of our discussion. So if we are looking at the future of the Internet Governance Forum per se, and we are 1 year left before the decision by the UNGA in New York, I think we can pinpoint 2 of the most crucial issues that, or the challenges that the Internet Governance Forum are facing right now. And I would start by the issue of exclusiveness versus inclusiveness. So from a perspective from one camp, if I may, we believe that the Internet Governance Forum is open and it's inclusive of all stakeholders from all countries and governments and so on and so forth. But the other camp poses the challenge that actually the forum is being exclusive to the participants that who have been there for the previous 9 years. And I would be neutral, but if we look around the room, we will see some missing players from different parts of the world, from the Arab region, for instance. Even from Africa on a government level, there are few, but still we miss the lot of or the many players that we can have from the different stakeholders. I'm not speaking about a specific criteria, but I'm speaking in general. So I would like to listen to the views of 2 of our panelists here. Jimson, I would start with you, if I may, to share with you from maybe an African perspective, how can the IGF strengthen the participation or attract more players to the forum each year?
Thank you very much, Neme, and good morning, everyone. My name is Jimson Olufuye. I have the privilege of being the chair of the Africa ICT Alliance, a private sector-led organization to bring together ICT players in the private sector in particular so that they can be involved in the process. We're based in Nigeria, and we currently have membership of 14 African countries. My day job is managing a company, an ICT company, internet-based. In fact, if internet collapses, I'll be out of business, and a lot of workers that are working with me. And so this topic is very important. From our perspective, the private sector in Africa in particular want to be involved. They strongly want to be involved. But our level of involvement so far, I think I will need to credit the work of the CSTD on this. The CSTD have done a great job, especially with the chairmanship of Peter Major in the working group on IGF improvement and enhanced cooperation, emphasizing inclusiveness. There are still many that are yet to be part of this process. Many questions that is asked, in particular, say, what is in it for us? Business, private, what am I to gain going there, spending money to be there? So until they become part of it, they do not appreciate the importance of this, and it applies to businesses indeed. And so there has to be special consideration for businesses in developing countries to be involved. And we have seen the dividend of that even in our nation, in my nation, Nigeria, wherein the government is actively involving the private sector. We've seen the teledensity improved, internet penetration improved, and even today, because of collaboration with the private sector, there is a one-day clearing of check beginning from today. And so there is great improvement, and we need to let this go down to the national level. There are still many nations that do not have national IGF in developing and least developed countries, so we need to continue the conversation. The mandate needs to be renewed, and we need to keep reflecting, because this is a living organism. The internet and the governance of the internet is quite organic, and we need to focus on it, because the living standard of many people, impoverished people, depend on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimson, and I share with you some of the views that you have shared, but I would like to be even more specific, because if we are able to pinpoint some recommendations that we can include even in our report, that would be perfect. And I will refer to Philippe, and I will actually ask a question about, is funding an issue when it comes to inclusiveness of more players from the different stakeholder categories, Philippe? Philippe? Did you hear the question? Yes, I'm no, it's okay. I was just trying to focus more on how to include more participants, and I'm asking if funding is an issue. Is funding an issue?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share a few thoughts and, address your question. It's needless to say that the multi-stakeholder approach is the only way and the only right way to go ahead. I think it's been quite clear in that discussion and all that discussion over the last 10 years, which leads to the discussion today, that there is no single model of internet governance. So the community has to learn to find the right answers to the many individual challenges of the internet world, case by case, in a button-up, open, transparent, and inclusive policy development process. That said, we do recognize the need for evolution and development of this model. In this context, we note that the increased use of so-called cross-community approaches, which we see in the ICANN construct the segment of the multi-stakeholder approach we traditionally mostly involved in. Such cross-community approaches have proved an interesting mechanism for breaking down silos and enhancing collaborative development across broad and diverse interests. Moreover, we also note a very interesting development within ICANN, where the GNSO and the GAC are actively exploring mechanisms to collaborate effectively and specifically early in the policy development process. Accountability is implicit in this button-up multi-stakeholder model, and that is effectively built in. In addition, ICANN has significant accountability mechanism built in its own structures. Indeed, part of the driver for the recent work on enhanced GNSO and GAC collaboration was the outcome of the ICANN's own accountability and transparency review team work. Only accountable players will have their respective role in this, how my friend Wolfgang Kleinwächter, who is actually missing today, calls it the rainforest of the internet ecosystem. The input of those accountable players would strengthen the IGF process, improve inclusiveness, including the regional initiatives I think Vint mentioned in the beginning, and will secure the IGF's role in that whole internet ecosystem of internet governance. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip, and I will refer to the audience, but I need to listen to some comments from Kathy and then Mark. And then if I may ask you to prepare your comments and reflections on this particular point, please. Kathy and then Mark.
I just want to talk about the funding. With respect to the global IGF, first, as we talk about the renewal of the mandate, I think it is enormously important that we include in that request to the United Nations sufficient funding for the Secretariat. I don't believe that the funding really necessary to organize and to think through the intersessional things we could be doing. By the way, look at that website. Imagine if we actually could keep updating news and best practices as we went along. If that were stronger, we would be better. That said, that funding does not allow us to pay for the travel for folks to come here or to support the national and regional IGFs, which is why the Internet Society this week facilitated the announcement of an association to financially support the IGF both here on the global stage but also on the regional and national stages. If we were to be able as a community to get what I'm calling sufficient, and I mean funding that is recognized by the world as big enough to support this movement, I think that financial underpinnings would do so much more to allow for the regional and national IGFs, which I believe are going to be the piece that is going to complete this maturity.
Thanks, Kathy. Mark, you have comments?
Thanks. Yes, I just wanted to come back in on this question of improving inclusivity. And I think overall the IGF has performed fairly well in terms of levels of participation and diversity. We do see a lot of familiar faces, but I have a feeling, not based on any scientific analysis, that the numbers are showing that we're getting more people involved. But also, we must think about the preparatory process, and this question of improving inclusivity extends to that. I've been on the MAG. I've looked and evaluated all the workshop proposals in this bottom-up process of program setting, and it's very disappointing in terms of the numbers of proposals coming from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia Pacific, and those regions in particular. And maybe there is one mechanism that we could explore in the context of increasing linkages, and that is the national and regional IGFs. The UK was the first country to establish a national IGF. And the reason we did it was that we thought, well, this IGF is going to take place. What are we going to contribute to it? Shall we run a workshop? So one of the rationales for our national IGF was to prepare for the global IGF. If perhaps the agenda setting for other newer national IGFs and regional IGFs could include a section on, well, what are we going to do at the global IGF? Maybe that would enhance inclusivity of the contributions to the programming, as well as the flow through in terms of participation in the actual forum. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Mr. Minister, you have a comment as well? And then I will open the floor, if you can queue, please. But just after the Minister.
Yes, because we're asking ourselves questions about inclusivity, about Plan B, and so on and so forth. And I think that part of the answer is, as was just mentioned, to include the local communities. And I think that the British example should be followed, and we should be creating IGFs nationally, which could actually feed into the process that we are just participating in. Point number 2. Is when we want, as I was saying at the beginning, to actually influence the policy process, I think that we should do something about the way we communicate. It should be a two-way process. For example, I think that IGF should be adopting recommendations. Now we can discuss how it should be done, but I think that that would actually facilitate that sort of two-way exchange of views. Then the next question is about structure. And here I think that if we want to improve the status quo, I think that MAG needs to change its nature from the organizational committee to actually a steering committee, which has helped facilitate all the things that we've been talking about. And finally, the last point, we need to streamline financing. I mean, we need to have money to actually organize our activities, but the most important thing is with no strings attached, which is going to be pretty difficult. But I think that without these changes, it will be very difficult to actually go into the next stage where actually the things that we do in here influence the policy process in a meaningful way, and when we actually engage people in a grassroots kind of way, which is, I think, the way forwards if we are to be taken seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Actually, you are forward-looking, because this is exactly the flow of thoughts that we would like to continue discussing with you and the audience, of course. And I think we have a queue. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Rajan Matthews, and I represent COI, which is an association of private operators from India. So I'm a first-time attendant at IGF, and I've been very impressed with the open nature. It was no barrier to entry, and the ability to express one's opinions was very open. So I'm very impressed with the forum of IGF, and I would keenly encourage India to be able to piggyback on the strength of IGF in terms of a national presence, to be able to integrate into the international forum. So again, would strongly encourage the activities, the openness, and the inclusiveness of the dialogue. And again, the commitment, certainly from the operator community in India, to have its voice represented in the developing nation's perspective on inputs to the development of the internet. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter.
Good morning. My name is Peter Bruck. I'm the chairman of the World Summit Award. We are running since 2003. We are running since 2003 in 160 countries as part of the WSIS follow-on process, the contest and competition for best practice in e-content, in order to show what internet and especially also mobile can do, an impact for diversity of cultures, content and languages. If one looks back to 2003, 2005, IGF is a success story. UN Guide, the Global Alliance for ICT and Development, faltered and was a failure. And IGF has continued. But if one looks at the relationship between IGF and ECOSOC and the United Nations system, it needs to be reformed and also improved. That is a key issue which relates to the funding, because if one looks at the shameful interregnum when it was not clear of how the IGF Secretariat and also the General Speaker and the process of the MAC can be funded, that cannot be continued. I think one of the key issues, however, is also to focus on the mandate of the IGF. IGF has taken on issues like ICT 4D, so the impact in terms of ICT and development, But it's also very important that it considers the issues regarding the development of an interactive content industry, because that content industry is actually the guarantee for the diversity of languages, cultures, and also the development in various different kind of regions. Lastly, I think one should also look at the process of IGF as a success story. It has evolved from a discussion group where a lot of redundancy has been part of it into something which is much more forward-looking and also focused towards decision-making and support, as Yanis Kaklins has pointed out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. And we have two more speakers before we reflect back to the panel, please.
Thank you. My name is Arun Sukumar. I'm a journalist with the New Delhi-based daily, The Indian Express. My question, if I may, is specifically to the representatives from Brazil and India. What do you see, where do you see the role of governments vis-a-vis other stakeholders in outcome-oriented internet governance processes? Do you see them on an equal footing or as primary interlocutors? Thank you.
Thank you. And we have...
Mr. Chan, head of the Chinese delegation at the IGF.
Thank you very much. My name is Chen Bo. I'm the Deputy Director General in charge of multilateral issues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yes, I do not want to pretend to be the expert on internet, but I think that this is my first IGF meeting. And a few days before that, people asked me that what are the incentives for many newcomers to come for this IGF? I tried to say something, but I try to be silent finally. But I think that certainly it is the importance of internet. And it is the importance of internet for the ordinary people in China, particularly in China, such a large population, and which we have also have more than 650 internet users. So when I was listening to different views from our representatives here, I find that actually China has a lot to say about how to look at the issues concerning internet. In my view, this is a new thing, certainly. And at the same time, I very much agree, this is a complex issue because we have so many workshops, we have so many people coming, and even after 9 sessions of IGF, we have not come up with a concrete, clear, and common understanding of how we should tackle the internet issue. So I just want to spend a little bit more time on our observations on how we look at the IGF. Today's topic is about the role of IGF. In Chinese way, we say that after observing several meetings of IGF, we find this is really like a tea house. But I think that for the future, we have to make it more successful. There must be next step forward and to implement the proposals and good ideas in this session, in this meeting. And the future of IGF, the success of future IGF, in my view, relies on very much on 2 issues. One is the inclusiveness. We have to, even though we all say that multi-stakeholder approach is a good one, but 3,500 representatives, they are very representative. But are they really representative? We have learned that more than 2/3 of the population are unable to access internet. And how shall we bring them on board? Where are their views? And how about the majority of the developing countries which still lack the capacity building? So I think, first of all, relies very much on the inclusiveness. Second important thing, I think, also relies on the implementation part, which I mentioned just now. Without further steps forward, this IGF will continue to be a tea house. And I would suggest that some other colleagues have mentioned that very important ideas, which I learned from. That is, we must also try to facilitate the regional IGF, the national IGF. In China, we have sponsored several meetings, which are very successful. If we really mean that we want to bring all those interested on board, we must also focus on the national IGF. We must also focus and invest on regional IGF. This is not the only platform that we represent. I mean, we cannot claim that we are representing all of the population in the world. So this is one of my observations. Secondly, the role of IGF. We would very much emphasize on the importance of the role of the government. We support the multi-stakeholder approach. This is approach have accepted by almost all. And this is the approach that, in fact, in many developing countries, including China, has already done so. When we talk about the scientific decision-making process, the meaning of scientific is we have to do a lot of research. We have to listen to different views before the government is going to make policies, public policies. And we also should not be naive that believing that the multi-stakeholder approach is the most effective way. Finally, there should be a multi-stake approach plus the different roles and particularly the key roles of the government. So I think that it is very important, finally, the government should be brought on board and they should not be marginalized. And we should not try to fragment the different stakeholders. Every stakeholder has a role to play. So I think that it is pretty important. We will continue to work on this IGF. And on last part, on the funding issue, I very much agree that we must ensure the stable funding for the IGF. And we would propose that perhaps the funding for IGF should be brought to the UN regular budget. And certainly, fundings from the enterprises and private sectors is most welcome. But I think that we must ensure a stable funding for the IGF so that to make this IGF more successful. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Ambassador Kirkland smiling, so I think you've achieved your point. We have remote participant.
Thank you, Narmeen. This is your remote moderator. There is an intervention from a MAG member who couldn't be here in person. He'd like to share a couple of comments. We'll make it brief. And he'd like to, Mr. Bill Drake comments from the remote platform that he'd like us to see moving forward on the Net Mundial agreement. And there are some specific suggestions for strengthening the IGF. The first one asks us to pick 2 issues that are sufficiently pressing and mature and create dedicated teams to work on them online and meet face-to-face alongside the February and the May open consultations. He'd also like us to see creating open online platforms to take on board inputs from the global community. Also, have the MAG and its chair, with the assistance of the Secretariat, conduct very active outreach to encourage governments, particularly from the developing countries, to participate in these teams. The teams can then produce draft discussion documents by 2 months before the Brazil meeting, followed by another round of public input and a final revision taking on board the views expressed. The documents then can be discussed on a single day of the program dedicated to this task to see if either recommendations of the attendees or at least a statement reflecting major points of view can be generated and circulated to other relevant organizations. Thank you for listening. These are specific suggestions on strengthening the IGF and intersessional work.
Thanks, Subi. And I think we had several specific questions, I remember, to Brazil and to India, and maybe few other comments as well that you would like to reflect upon, but maybe we can do this in very quick manner so that we can continue with our flow of thoughts. So, Ambassador Benedicto, and then Your Excellency, please.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank the question, and it also gives me the opportunity also to reflect on the point that was previously made by Mr. Cavus on the issue regarding equal footing, role of government, how those things interact with the multi-stakeholder approach. Well, first of all, I'd like to remind that for government, the basic framework under which we work and we try to be consistent with in everything, at least this is an attempt we try to do in Brazil, is to be consistent with the framework that was established by the Tunis Agenda, which is our basic parameter. So Tunis Agenda recognizes there are different roles, responsibilities for stakeholders, that all of those stakeholders have legitimate concerns and interests. So that does not mean equal role. Equal role in the context of Tunis Agenda applies specifically to the notion of enhanced cooperation. In the context of that referring to public policies, governments should have equal role in designing those. Of course, there is an effort to the maximum extent possible, and I think this was reaffirmed by the Net Mundial Conference, to extend the multi-stakeholder approach whenever possible. And I thank very much Katie Brown for having given us this. I think she was very precise in that description, I think much better than most of us could have done, explaining how we try to work in Brazil, having the multi-stakeholder discussion, then implement it in various layers and levels. So it's, and equal footing is not always there. Just to give an example, in regard to critical resources, there's not equal footing. Governments are not implementing equal footing. Governments have an advisory role. And I think nobody is trying to say equal footing should apply there. But in some other intergovernmental facets where there is not equal footing or multi-stakeholder participation, there is a call. We are 100% in favor of opening up even intergovernmental discussions to multi-stakeholder participation. Discussion should be better informed by multi-stakeholder approach, but recognizing that in the end, in some cases, the decision will be intergovernmental, and I think this is a fact that should be recognized. I think the whole ecosystem can work in harmony if there is mutual recognition, mutual acceptance, mutual respect. I think we try to do it in the context of Net Mundial. I just like to quote something that I think reflects very much that notion in regard to cybersecurity and cybercrime. It says, it is necessary to strengthen international cooperation on topics such as jurisdiction and law enforcement, assistance to promote cybersecurity and prevent cybercrime. Discussions about those frameworks should be held in a multi-stakeholder manner. So I think we tried here to reconcile the idea of multi-stakeholder discussion, informed processes that are per se intergovernmental, cybercrime, cybersecurity, although cybersecurity has a dimension that extends beyond the governmental, but those, for example, cybercrime is a very precise area for. So I think there is a need to maybe have an understanding, and again, I think mutual recognition, mutual respect, I think this is the basis for the system to work in a better way, making the best of the contribution of each stakeholder to the benefit of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Your Excellency, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Firstly, I'll take that question from India, which says that we should hold the regional or national IGFs. In India, just to inform you, we are having one in the end of November. And we certainly believe that we'll continue to have such consultations and discussions with all these stakeholders in our country, which actually impinge on the internet governance. On the issue of our friend from Indian Express, who basically asked the question whether everybody should be on the equal footing or not, I think I would like to agree with my friend from Brazil. Essentially, everyone has a role to play in this game, and this is not a game which is played at one level. You know, this is a multi-layered situation, and let me explain that. You know, you have at the base of it an infrastructure on which the entire traffic moves. Now, infrastructure is an area which is essentially the governments of the country, along with the private sector participants, and create. And it is all private sector is certainly involved, many standards involved, many other parties involved. Then comes the critical resources. Now, obviously, the governments, as he says, do not have a very direct role to play. It is something rule-based situation which is happening, and therefore it should continue to happen that way. Then comes the issue of, security, cyber security. Now, certainly, governments are not the only arbiter of, what is the cyber security part, but certainly governments have a responsibility. And they will obviously have to get feedback from the industry, from the experts in that area. And that is when they will be able to make policy decisions or some kind of actions. So essentially, cyber security is an area where every stakeholder will certainly need to be consulted, will their expertise utilized, leveraged, but ultimately it is the governments who will have to, take action in that particular space, obviously in consultation and in collaboration with the private sector. Lastly, the applications which are riding on the net, and obviously applications government really do not have much role to play insofar as they do not create cyber security issues, and the private sector will continue to have their role, and the civil society and the other stakeholders. So essentially, I think labeling it as multi-stakeholder or multilateral is not really the right way to go about it, but really understanding that each component, what does each component of the whole system requires, and which are the best parties to deal with that problem. Essentially, that should be the approach. And if that approach is recognized and accepted, I think we'll certainly have a very harmonious way of doing things, and we should also then be able to have not only a discussion forum which does not lead us anywhere, but a system which can really contribute towards the decision making and finally leading to some conclusions. That's our approach, and I think that's what should be pursued. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and may I remind us all that we have left 40 minutes and we have two very important topics that we need to further discuss. And I think, Alejandro, you have a comment, quick comment, please, because we need to move to the second one.
Thank you. Alejandro Pisanti speaking. Related to expanding to several of the notions that have been put forward to expand participation, sticking to in their specific roles is a losing proposition. More space must be made for people who play multiple roles and have expertise and legitimacy in different sectors. The fact that some decisions will be governmental or intergovernmental, such as national level cybersecurity or the fight against crime, does not imply that the IGF and similar discussions can be set aside. Openness and inclusiveness interact in a virtuous circle. The more openness in a country, the more likely that different sectors from that country will participate. In the process, it will be very diverse. The participation has to be permissionless, without negative consequence when people go back to their country after speaking and learning in the IGF. Effectiveness and decision making are sector or country specific. So the role of the IGF to bring more people here is bring them here to understand more the issues, that they will go back then to either ICANN kind of mechanisms or to their countries. The concrete outcomes question is now testable thanks to Net Mundial. How long did it take to actually get the draft? What was the process? Was it robust with the risks to the different participants? This is something that the IGF can now study on that case and then begin to look at the cost and risk to the IGF itself of making that kind of change and whether that will impact the participation.
Thank you so much, and allow me to take you to another dimension that we'd like to tackle with you. That is a very tempting question, whether or not to have an output, a concrete output out of the Internet Governance Forum, a question that has been thoroughly discussed throughout the years, and I would maybe give you a glimpse that we have seen two models during the previous year. We've seen the Net Mondial with and I will quote the diplomacy terminology, rough consensus output kind of. And we have seen as well the ITU coordinated high-level event held in June with the full consensus document. And we have seen here during this IGF, the best practices forum as per paragraph 72 of the Tunis agenda. And I would like to pose the question, do you see that there is a legitimate point to start thinking about having a concrete output? And the second question will be posed by my colleague Jovan, how to do that. But our question is, do you see it legitimate and do you see it feasible to have a concrete output? And if Joseph can elaborate on that, please.
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. The IGF has a unique DNA which allows it, as Alessandro said, to facilitate the broad conversations that are the stepping stones to consensus. But it also has the ability to use those conversations to inform practical outputs for capacity building, for best practice, and for knowledge transfer. The IGF in that sense is a laboratory for diverse exploration. It is not a body that is bogged down in negotiating text and should not become a body that is bogged down in negotiating text and is not suited to a unitary outcome. Outcomes, as we see them, are not negotiated documents. Alessandro said it better than I, so his concept of how net neutrality and the conversations at IGF of a complex topic that does not have consensus, those conversations actually move the ball forward. We found places where we need to do more research. We found places where we had misunderstandings that were clarified. This in and of itself is a valuable output and should not be thought of as anything less. To say that that's just talking is to miscomprehend the value of that conversation. We do, however, need to better capture the learning, because you come to an IGF, you go to a very interesting panel, you participate in that panel in some way or another. You find, though, that when you go home, what you have is a memory that isn't actionable. And that's not enough. So we need to figure out how to make the capacity building and the knowledge transfer actionable, practical, portable, and applicable. One of the ways we can do that is to link existing resources to discussions that are happening. And in that context, we should be especially considering and paying attention to the issues of developing countries. People have spoken about expanding the breadth and the depth of participation. I will tell you that from a business perspective, we have taken this action item on to talk about extending the breadth of the types and sectors of companies that are represented, extending the breadth of the geographies that are represented, and going across all sizes of companies to be represented. And finally, as we think of how to energize the IGF or strengthen it, a lot has already been said about the national and regional IGFs. And in many ways, we need to think of them as how to have omnidirectional communication and knowledge transfer. So not just within the national and regional IGF, not just between the national or regional IGF and the IGF, but across all of them. And that is really the network, and our first level of intersessional cooperation is building across the national and regional IGFs and the IGF, so that would be one of the places, and I agree, investment across all of those fronts is necessary. And with that, thank you.
Thanks, Joseph. Dr. Govind, can you share with us your views on having or have not concrete output of the IGF?
Thank you, Jeremy, for giving me an opportunity to be here in this very enlightened panel. IGF has been a quite enlightened, more enabler in the long run, what we have seen right from the 2008 when we hosted the IGF in India. And it has been a quite, as Mr. Fadi said, it is more participation. As more and more participation, I can see in this IGF, we have more than 50 participants from India, from the various stakeholders. And that shows how the IGF is evolving in the country, how we are very seriously looking into the IGF process, and how we are looking into the internet, which is an enabler, which is a global medium. And internet has been a catalyst for change, propelling economic growth, enabling extended governance outreach, positively influencing the lives of its people, and building new narratives for India. And indeed, internet has been a transformative for India, and the Digital India program, which has been brought recently by the Prime Minister, and Mr. R. Sharma ji is here, he talked about yesterday, that we show how the next billion which is going to be added into the internet is going to come from India, and how inclusive the capacity building and all those aspects which we are going to work. And IGF
the discussion in the IGF, the amount of participation which is coming up and the amount of the kind of topics which are going to come in this is as the internet is evolving, so the topics are also evolving. It is not that static in the time frame. Not right from the 2006 Athens IGF and 2014 this IGF, you can see the variety spectrum of the issues, and today I can see that more and more critical internet resources issues or the public policy issues and the funding issues all are going to be discussed in a very, very elaborate and very, very widened way. And this is, and again in India, we are having our own India IGF that will feed into the global IGF, and we have a multi-stakeholder process where we have selected from academia, technical community, and government and private sector, and which is helping us to see that how inclusively we engage the all stakeholders within the country and as all the issues which we are going to discuss with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow, that's really, really rich menu with so many ingredients, and I hope we'll manage to cook a nice dish. Before I pass the floor to my colleagues from academic community to reflect from experts' view on all of these ideas that we have heard, including the new metaphor of tea house, thank you, for broadening the metaphor space of our discussion on internet governance. I will just refer to Mr. Sharma's 2 points which are probably underlying in our discussion. One is the labelization of discussion, and this is extremely important, and looking at the concrete issue and trying to address very concrete issues. And the second point, which was introduced by Minister Sharma and then echoed by Benedicto and other colleagues, is that there is a space for harmonious relations, and there is a space to have a role, effective, constructive role of all stakeholders. And I think it sets the stage for reflections from academic community, how to do it, how to find that magic formula. What we said in discussion after Net Mundial, how we should manage this process from blue skies, many options, to the final phase where you have red lines. How to manage that evolution where you essentially have to capture the complexity of arguments, diversity of arguments in one text. It was done quite successfully in the case of Net Mundial, but it is a real challenge. And I would like to invite my good colleagues from the academic community, Jeremy Malcolm from EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, who wrote probably one of the most insightful papers on the IGF and the way how IGF should be moved forward. Later on, Penghua and Stephanie Perrin. Jeremy, please go ahead.
Hello. Sorry, my desk microphone is not working. So thank you, Jovan. And as you said, this is a problem that is not new, and Net Mundial did make some very good attempts at addressing this tension. Also, we had some suggestions from the floor that have already come in via remote participation, that there should be online platforms that could be used to develop outputs in a very concrete way. I would like to take issue, though, with the way that this question is sometimes framed. Mr. Olderhoff from the ICC, who just spoke a few minutes ago, framed it in terms of negotiated outcomes from the IGF, and I think that's not the right way to frame it. It's a very loaded phrase, which sort of suggests its own answer, that no, we would never want negotiated outcomes from the IGF, because that would be the death of the IGF. But no one has ever really been suggested that kind of process. It suggests we're haggling over the placement of a comma, like we would at the UN Security Council or something like that. But we don't talk about the IETF producing negotiated outcomes. That doesn't freak people out. in the context of the IETF. Even the OECD is a forum where we rarely would describe it as negotiated outcomes. So it's an inappropriate framing of the question. The correct question is, how can we produce outcomes while avoiding certain traps, such as, number one, power imbalances, where some stakeholders can dominate others by force of numbers or by interpersonal factors or because of money and influence. So we want to steer away from that. Also, capacity imbalances, where some parties may lack the capacity to contribute their views in a compatible way, or because they lack understanding of the issues. And also, we want to avoid the problem where discussion is chilled because people are afraid to speak because they don't want to paint themselves into a corner by expressing their views honestly. So these are completely valid concerns, and I absolutely accept them 100%. But on the other hand, they are also very well understood problems. And there is a well-established literature and practice which addresses these problems. It's called deliberative democracy. It involves intensively facilitated deliberations that are designed to facilitate well-informed decision-making, and it's designed to neutralize these power imbalances. So Net Mondial did make some progress towards this, but for the IGF, I think we may want to also look at intersessional online working groups who could create some draft outputs for discussion, and then these could come into a plenary session such as this one. I suggest that it could break into table groups to further deliberate and then come back together to identify points of rough consensus. And then ultimately someone has to decide whether a consensus has been reached. And my suggestion for that is that we need a new body within the IGF, which I've termed a multi-stakeholder Internet Policy Council. Minister Trzewski from Poland mentioned that he thinks the MAG needs to change from a program committee into a steering committee. I suggest that the MAG is what it is, and I don't think the MAG is going to change very much. So I think we actually need a new multi-stakeholder policy body within the IGF that could exercise that steering function.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy, for bringing. If you have a quick comment to Jeremy's intervention, please, then we'll have to.
Yes, thank you. I think that we can discuss ideologically forever whether, what's the meaning of negotiated text and whether deliberative democracy, appreciative inquiry, or just plain facilitation are a best way to achieve results. Anyway, when you're going to achieve an agreed text, you are going to have negotiations. And I don't see, as I said previously to finish, this is now an experimentally testable proposition. We just have to go back to Net Mundial and see what it took to get an agreed text. It's 6 months, 1,000 people, a fully established secretariat.
Alejandro, in brief, you argue that if you have the outcome, it has to be negotiated, and there is no sort of other solution. Okay, then we have a next speaker, Peng Hua, please.
Okay, thank you, Jovan. I want to talk a bit about history here, begin by talking about history. If you look at the IGF and how and why it started, it was at a time when issues around internet governance were not clear. So it was surfacing issues around internet governance. 9 years later, I think we are much clearer about internet governance issues, what is to be included, what is not to be included. I don't think we can continue as is. I call the IGF in that form as IGF 1.0. We now need a 2.0. I think the 2.0 is in a form of some kind of agreement, not so much along the lines of negotiated agreements, as my colleague Jeremy has ably described, not along those lines, but really on substantive topics, substantive issues that we need to look at. Minor transition is one, that will be one. Intermediary liability has been happening around here, that's another one. I think that on the substantive points that need to be done, I think the various institutions that are supporting the IGF, the MAG, the Secretariat, even GigaNet, will need to evolve. They need to evolve so that it's not just a matter of surfacing issues, but surfacing issues with a point of agreement, coming to some point of agreement whereby something can be done. The agreement does not have to be unanimous. Rough consensus would be enough. The agreement would be enough so that people can see these are things to be done and things to be avoided. I think that we need to look also at some issues that we really have not addressed. One would be the issue of the critical resources, the management of critical resources. Have we reached a reasonable consensus on that? We need to look also at development, because this issue will arise again for the WSIS plus 10 review, and this is put now on the front burner, and we do need to look at that. So I think enough issues to look at, and the evolution of supporting institutions for the IGF. Thank you.
Thank you. Benhua, Stephanie, please, and then we'll have a few interventions from the audience. Please queue in front of the microphone. Stephanie, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, my name's Stephanie Perrin. I'm doing research at the University of Toronto on surveillance studies and internet governance, but I'm here sitting in this chair representing civil society. And a lot of my points, I think, have already been made, particularly by our colleague, distinguished colleague from China. I'm sitting in this chair because I am a middle-class Canadian woman of a certain age, old enough to be a grandmother. I have sufficient resources, though not ample, that if I care to donate my time to ICANN, and my personal resources to a certain extent, to work on civil society issues that I'm passionate about, I can do it. But we haven't talked about fairness, and I don't think this is fair. If I were a grandmother in a remote village in, pick a country, China, India, somewhere in Africa, I wouldn't be able to do that, and we have not solved that problem. So I would like in my minute here to focus on what civil society cares about, and that's not so much the new mandate of the IGF, but the practical implementation of the issues that we have been discussing. And I believe that there is much work to do. First of all, we care about getting the poor and the disadvantaged to take the advantage of the internet, and we care about outreach. I think that is one thing we all share, from an economic, a fairness, a civil right, you name it. From that perspective, we agree. Secondly, we care about the practical implementation of human rights. There has been wonderful work done here this week, and there will be more sessions coming on privacy and human rights. And obviously, as a surveillance scholar, I care about that. But rhetoric and principles doesn't bring it to the ground level. So we need to do that, and there is work to do. And thirdly, the mandate of the IGF, we care very deeply that this move to the next level of maturity, that we get stable funding, that it continue, that there is certainty that we will be here in 10 years' time, expanding this discussion and bringing it to the people who are not there. And that will take money, not just tourism to bring people to the meeting, but money to support the people in the regions. So that means regional IGFs, and it means finding more funding to help projects. So we look for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and congratulations to my academic colleagues to staying within the time limit, which is a real challenge for academia. Bravo. Okay, we have two interventions from Jeanette and Raoul, please. And
my name is Jeanette Hofmann.
We could take two more comments or questions, but please, whoever would like to say to make comments should queue here, please.
My name is Jeanette Hofmann. I'm also an academic. I've been involved in drafting the Net Mundial statement, and I'm right now drafting a statement. And I want to comment on Alejandro. You are absolutely right. It takes lots of people, lots of time, and it takes lots of effort to get it done. But from my perspective, this is not the point. The main question for me is, if you have a message and you get the feeling that it's broadly shared, that all stakeholder groups agree with you, how do you get it across? And I think we as a community need to learn to make progress in getting our messages across. And it's not the question of whether we call it a statement or anything else, and I don't want to sort of have long negotiation processes. The question is, how do we make what we do here relevant? And one way of doing is to sort of write down sentences. They travel better than just words. We want the messages from here to migrate to other places. And sometimes it needs to be written down so that it can become a reference point for next year's meeting, so that we don't have to have the same workshop topic again. We can just say, we discussed this last year. And what I would suggest what we do is that we don't be too ambitious, and that we need statements that all participants can agree upon. It would be already sufficient if we could have a process where a few groups say, we support this, and if you also want to support it, sign on. But we need to develop processes to do that. At the moment, I'm bilaterally sending emails, waiting hours for a response because the network is not working. It takes a lot of effort, and we have to get better at that.
Thank you, Jeanette, for bringing reality check that sometimes, as you indicated, we have to write sentences and draft the text, and that's should be output of the some of the negotiating processes. Raul Echeverria, Raul spent quite a bit of time, long nights in negotiating Net Mundial final document, and please, Raul.
This is an example of positive discrimination, because I was before Janet on the line, but she spoke first. Okay. So I have to change my speech now. Okay. My name is Raúl Echeverría. I am Vice President for Global Engagement on the Internet Society, former chair of the Executive Committee at Net Mundial. My comment goes in the direction that we have been talking here about how to produce outcomes without negotiations, and on if negotiation is needed or not. And I think that's the main lesson learned from Net Mundial is exactly that we can produce outcomes, whatever an outcome is, but we can produce outcomes in an open, bottom-up process without negotiation, formal negotiation mechanism. And this is, I think that this was the most innovative thing at the Net Mundial, because I believe, maybe there are some examples, but I believe that it had been never done before, not even in the internet governance field, but probably at the international governance level. So I think that this is the most important lesson that we learned from the process of Net Mundial. So we can do it. We did it one time, and many people criticize some aspects of the process at Net Mundial. Of course, we can improve it, but we demonstrated that it is possible. And my second comment goes in the direction that don't forget that it doesn't matter how concrete are the outcomes of the IGF, it will not turn in policies at the local level if we don't have IGF-like mechanisms at the local level, because 95% of the policy making happens at the national level. So it doesn't matter how concrete are the outcomes we produce here. We need other mechanisms at the national level for bringing our findings and combining with the national expertise, experience, and so be sure that the policies that are developed at the national level are influenced by not only by the global experience, but the experience of others, but also for the different perspective of the stakeholders at the national level. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. Anya, please. Anya Kovac.
Thank you, Jovan. I'm Anya Kovac from the Internet Democracy Project in Delhi. I wanted to, in a way, add on to what Jeanette was saying earlier. On Monday, we had a day-long event about the Net Mundial, where we also had an extensive discussion on what the IGF could do to take the agenda of the Net Mundial outcome document forward. And I think what I heard here today is a lot about the kind of substantive issues that are there in the outcome document and how we can make sure that they get addressed in a better way, that more people are involved in addressing them, etc. But the outcome document also has a number of internet governance principles. And I think we can also do much more work on thinking, what is the kind of leadership role that the IGF could play in actually putting those principles in practice? And I think there's still a lot of work to do, particularly around transparency and accountability. And so for me, the proposal that Jeanette made is also a way to be accountable. We cannot just have conversations without having an outcome, because that also means that we lack accountability. So I think on the substance level, there is a question of accountability. There's also one more on the process level. I know there are lots of recommendations already floating around about, for example, how there could be far more transparency in the constitution of the MAG. And I think it's really important, if the IGF continues, that we also take all these recommendations on board and really push the internet governance principles part of the outcome document as well. Finally, on a side note, since I have 30 seconds left, people ask again and again why developing countries are not here. I can say much more than 20 seconds about that. But one thing that's really a problem with the current workshop proposal process is that speakers need to be confirmed when the workshop proposal is made. And most developing country participants cannot even go and look for funding until they are sure that they are on a workshop. You actually make it structurally impossible for new people to join the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. We just heard from interpreters that we have 10 more minutes, and with them you cannot negotiate easily. Therefore, please stick to the short interventions. What we have heard is that the real challenge will be how to produce the outcome document or conclusion or concrete conclusions of the IGF. We have heard many concrete ideas and suggestions, dilemmas, risks, opportunities, and somehow I indicated at the very beginning that for me Net Mundial experience was somewhere between blue sky and possibilities and red lines, and apparently I just found the color when you mix blue and red is purple. Therefore we should try to find how we make purple color while we are progressing with our discussion on the IGF outcome, including the possible process of negotiations. I would like to invite panelists to make last quick comments for 30 seconds. Please go ahead. Subi, just 140 words. Okay, that's fine. Okay, please go ahead.
I'll be happy to start. I found this session amazingly good. I think there have been a lot of concrete ideas put on the table, recommendations that we need to take together and take a hard look at it. By the time we get to Brazil, and yes, we're going back to Brazil, thank you, I would hope we have a stable and financially secure secretariat. We will have our renewal of our mandate to be together. We will have advanced some of the best practices kinds of recommendations that are being developed here. We will take a look at making sure that we're not disabling people from coming by the way we structure our program. Enormously important. And we will see the rise of national and regional IGFs. If we get to Brazil and we have these things happening with some written documents, I think when we get there, we will start to see the output kind of activity that we want to see. Thank you for a fabulous session.
Okay, we have on this side, I think, Benedicto, Fadi.
Fadi and Alan would like to hear you as well.
Please.
Okay, thank you. No, I'll be very brief. I would like to restate something I said before. If we want to make a reality the vision that we had 9 years ago in Tunis and was enshrined in the Tunis agenda of ecosystem involving different stakeholders with legitimate interest, working to the full, bringing the best of their capacity and expertise according to different roles and responsibilities. I think it is imperative that bridges must be built among the different processes and existing fora. I think this is something that is badly needed in order that what we are doing here will be in dialogue with other settings in which the multi-stakeholder dimension is not so clear, so that there will be benefit for the system as a whole. Regarding the IGF will be hosting Brazil next year, I think there is a collective challenge before us to make sure that discussions will be substantive, meaningful, that will be organized in a way that will lead to this. Also, I think a very important point was made, take into account what has been discussed before, not at each IGF starting as we are starting from zero, so take into account. And then communicating these outputs, those outcomes. I don't think there will be negotiated outcomes, but even those outcomes that will be meaningful for people that are outside the inner circle we're working. I think this is the measure of success of IGF, and we are committed to work towards strengthening IGF, is to the extent that IGF will be relating to those other existing processes, benefiting from those processes at the same time, also feeding to this, to the benefit of this system as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Fadi, please.
Thank you for the organizers. This was superb. Appreciate it. I have two closing messages from my side. The first, it's very clear listening. We must move from dialogue to action. Let's move. We have a lot of work to do. I think this is immensely important, but we need to translate it into action, and rapidly. The world needs us to do that. The second message I would like to leave is to remind all of us the trepidation, the fear, the concerns we all had going to Sao Paulo. Now, after Sao Paulo, we think of Sao Paulo as Mount Sinai. Nothing was very magical in Sao Paulo other than the fact that we came together and we had courage to innovate our governance. Let's have courage. Let's innovate. Let's build on the past. Let's not walk away from what we do, but let's be courageous and innovate. The Sao Paulo experiment proves that's possible, and it's also good. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have a few interventions on this side. Stephanie, please.
Thank you, Stephanie Perrin. Just a reminder, because we haven't focused on it, I think, much in this discussion, that one of the triggers for President Rousseff to hold Net Mondial was the new discourse on internet surveillance. Now, we are sitting here in one of the cradles of civilization. As students of history, we know governments will always do surveillance of their own citizens and of those of other countries. We also know that business will always sell products and services to governments. This has gone on since the dawn of time. We know that. So from civil society's perspective, wherever governments and business meet to talk about internet cybersecurity and internet governance, we need to be there to keep an eye on them with respect to surveillance. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any other concluding remark, Mark, and then Joseph, please.
Yes, thank you, Jovan. Mark of our UK government. Just quickly, we would not support any introduction of negotiating mechanisms of text into the IGF. We do believe it is possible to formulate outcomes in the form of options, informal recommendations that could be drawn to the attention of relevant existing entities, the national and regional IGFs, and so on. Secondly, we do support the existing funding mechanism as the appropriate one for the IGF, whereby governments, private sector, IGOs, individuals contribute to the trust fund. We would not support moving that into a UN budgetary process. And I conclude with a message to the private sector and other governments, anybody with money really, to join the UK government and others and step up to the plate. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph, please.
Thank you. Since it seemed to be the crux toward the end, I'd go back just to the documentation concept. The idea of making knowledge portable certainly means you have to write it down. So I completely agree with Jeanette. What we're talking about is you have to better understand how you're reporting out what you've learned. Because if you're not reporting out what you've learned, you haven't shared your learning. And should you get a position where everyone comes to a consensus, then you report that out to, and that's useful to another organization that's actually going to draft the document related to it. But if you start the process saying, I'm going to draft 2 documents, we're going to get a group of people, and we're going to spend the next 6 months doing nothing but that, then IGF will become 2 documents, 2 projects, and not the broad experimental organization that it is. And I think the value is that we are the bridge between different points of view on issues of contention and misunderstanding, and this bridge allows people to cross to other organizations where the drafting gets done.
Thank you. Well, I think we exhausted. We have the...
Thank you. Just to remind us that more than 2/3 of the world yet to be connected to the internet, and by implication, so many people yet to be aware of those critical issues, and we need to step up awareness going forward, and also to underscore that implementation really needs to happen at the national and regional level, more collaboration at that level. For example, internet exchange points proliferated in Nigeria because of this. And lastly, the governance framework is very important. Governance framework of our national IGF and regional IGF, very, very important. Not like at the global, it needs to be like the global, including everybody. So we need to take that message across. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems that we will have to somehow harvest this diversity and harness complexity into some sort of manageable and easily understandable outcomes and outputs of the IGF. Therefore, harvesting and harnessing are one of the few keywords that we may develop further. I would like to pass the floor to Chair for the concluding remarks.
Thank you. Thank you for the moderators for their great help. Let me just wrap up the session. And yes, we hear some keywords like openness, accountability, sharing ideas, comprehensiveness, inclusiveness, equal footing, concession, capacity building, best practices, education, and an outcome document, and even an action plan. So some people mention about outcomes, action plan, roadmap, etc. Even if we cannot achieve a signing agreement, I'm sure we can produce some draft outcome or an action plan, a roadmap. I think that could be useful for the future of IGF. I'm personally looking forward to come to Brazil, and I thank Brazil for their hosting of next event. Yes, before next year, we have a lot of work to do, a lot of homework and preparations. And we have to make sure we don't block anyone contributing to this process. Inclusiveness is very important, and it's the key to success of IGF. And we all should be aware of that. And I would like to thank to all many good speakers for joining us today for this important session, and thank all of you, all the participants, for sharing their ideas. Special thanks to Subi and Marilyn, of course, for their setting up this session. I think they did a good job. I think it was a useful, good session. I think we have answered many of the questions that raised during this panel, and good ideas, tangible outcomes, hopefully will come out. With these comments, I'd like to conclude the session. I thank again to all the participants, moderators, and anybody coming to this session. Thank you again. Yeah, bye-bye.